and I'm going to go into the network supervision and service supervision. Now, when we're doing the fault application lab, I'll just simply ask that you don't, jump ahead and also go into network supervision to use some type of tool in there that you think might make it easier. So, the idea is that I want to get used to the tool that you're actually using there. Now, of course, once you're used to using all of them, well, then, feel free to use the mix and match any application. And there's definitely circumstances where that might be the best thing to do. Okay. So moving on, the other final actually thing I do want to say is keep in mind, a lot of this material does come from one of our courses. Now we're doing it all in 3 hours here today. You'll notice some of the topics, or, I might have to quickly get through. The idea is to give you a good, solid foundation on how to use these applications. But of course, there's a lot of areas where I won't be able to go, too in depth. Okay. And really because, like I said, we're taking a 2-day course here and sort of putting it together in 3 hours. So, I'm going to do my best, and trust me, you will definitely be equipped with quite a bit of, knowledge when this workshop is done. I've had quite a few people tell me that, once the workshop was completed, they were able to successfully troubleshoot some areas. So that's good. Questions. That's another thing. A group this big, it's, if I get into actually answering a bunch of questions, it'll very easily take me away from what I need to deliver with respect to the topics. So I have some great colleagues of mine that are here to help out with answering most of the questions. So hopefully what we'll ask is, if you have a question, if you can put it in the chat window, and my colleagues will help answer those questions, even Stefan, to the best of their knowledge. And what I will do, though, is at the end of each of the applications, we'll take like a 5 minutes or whatever it is before we go on to the next application, where we'll just try and address, maybe some questions that didn't get answered, or maybe, a question involves maybe having to show something quickly on an app. But like I said, if we have to move on, please, I apologize for that, but we'll definitely get back to you with an answer at a later time for sure.
Shane, Perfect. Did you want to mention something quickly about the applications? Obviously many of the folks on this call will be using NFM-P, so they already have access to...
Great point. So lots of times when I deliver this workshop, and actually probably every time I deliver it in SR Experts, everyone asks me, and they tend to say, "Hey Shane, what release, or gosh, these applications are awesome. When did it come out?" And generally I ask them what release of the NSP or NFM-P they're running, and for the most part, a lot of people, I believe it's release 19. Eve can probably help out with this in the chat, but lots of times people, they have, 19 or 20 or whatever it is, and they think they actually have to go ahead and upgrade, and you don't. If you're running any of those releases, you have access to the assurance applications. There's no extra licensing or anything you actually need to go and get. So, and that's the focus here today. The focus is basically showing you, if you're running the classic sort of, NFM-P install, on release 19 or 20, you have access to these applications. So that's the idea here today. You don't have to go ahead and do this big network upgrade or anything like that. Lots of times it's there, and, we encourage you to go and take a look at it. And hopefully after this workshop, you'll feel much better about doing that, right? So that's really the focus here. Now there are some, that's not to say that, if you did upgrade, these applications, of course, still there, but yes, there are some newer features and things like that in these applications you would also get. Now, of course, I won't touch on those today, where this is more specifically around, if you are running the NFM-P sort of classic setup. Perfect. Darren, don't know if I missed anything. If I did, you can speak up, but if not, I'll move right into our workshop here.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. Okay, so just want to start off. I'm not going to spend too much time on the NSP assurance side, just giving you a quick overview, right, of the NSP assurance. and really what it offers. So, you probably heard a lot of these things before, things like, alarms, OAM, guaranteed SLAs. But what you're going to see here today is really how these new applications really enhance the overall value of these things, right? So, most of you or all of you are used to seeing, when people say NSP or NFM-P assurance, well, we're used to looking at what, right? That dynamic alarm list window, which really lots of times looks like maybe a Christmas tree, and it's lighting up all over the place with all these different colors. And that's really sort of the extent of the visualization that we get. It's great and all, but lots of times it can be confusing, of course, right? Because, I've seen dynamic alarm windows with thousands and thousands of alarms, and, it's great if we have something and, something to help us out, especially from a visualization standpoint, right? So you're going to see a lot of things here today where you see the second bullet there, enhanced visualization, okay? And that's really a major theme of what you're going to see here today in the applications, is really using visualization for many purposes, okay? Making your life easier, grouping alarms, finding root cause analysis, and things of that nature. So here's just this next slide. You can really just quickly see really the overall difference of looking at that dynamic alarm window. And now, as opposed to looking at that, well, having these different visualization starting points, I'll call them, and you'll see what I mean by starting points, in these new applications. So now you can see, well, you might have a node view here, or, you have this funky view on the right, which I'll get into later on, called the distribution or the alarm hierarchy. And, this impact view, and really these visualization features, at the end of the day, they help you troubleshoot much, much quicker, right? So they bring down your, mean time to repair and your overall troubleshooting of your issues. And it also helps you figure out, do I have one issue here, two issue here, three issues, and really simplify looking at that, instead of looking at that dynamic alarm window. Okay, that's the fault management application. I mentioned here today that we're going to look at a couple other applications that are called supervision applications. Now, there's two of them. One is the network supervision, and one is the service supervision. And yeah, I mean, both of them are, quite similar. They both are supervision applications. You'll see what I mean when I get into them, but they're both really KPI-based supervision applications. Probably the major difference between the two is the network supervision looks at more of the network view of things, as you can imagine, more of the equipment side of things, sort of the physical side of things, and the overall infrastructure, like the IGP, which you can actually kind of see here on the left, which is actually a multi-layer view, which we'll talk about later. Okay, whereas the service supervision, well, it looks more at the service side of things, right? So if you really want to hone in on services in your network, which most people do, or you can monitor certain, closely monitor certain VIP services, for example, service supervision is definitely the application for you. Okay, so a lot of great things there. We can focus on the service supervision. So kind of the way I like to look at the three applications is, well, fault management really gives you everything, right? I mean, that's going to be, all of your alarms, whether it's, network, infrastructure, services, I mean, you name it, logical, physical, whatever it is. And again, it's like, bringing up that dynamic alarm list and saying, show me everything that's there, right? Whereas network supervision, okay, looking more of the physical sort of infrastructure side of things. And service supervision, well, looking at your service side of things. So all those service objects and SDPs and things of that nature. Okay, and just looking at the overall benefits and values, and again, specifically talking about these NSP applications. So scaling, you'll see what I mean by scaling. I will point out some of these so-called, pet peeves that I've heard over the years from people, using the Java NFM-P UI, and I will point out a couple how we've addressed those in the new applications. So scaling, it definitely helps with scaling. Multi-domain and technology, I have a slide that covers that. So We're now able to, show some good relationships between not only the IP layer, but, the IP layer and optics, microwave domains, for example. It's very versatile and flexible, as well as integrated and optimized. So actually, if your network has analytics, for example, we've integrated troubleshooting tools, OAM tests, looking at KPIs for ensuring SLAs and that nature. So, and I've already mentioned, mean time to repair and error processing, and you can see there how, you will greatly benefit from these applications. Okay. Jumping right into fault management application overview. So anyone that knows kind of how, or if anybody's ever been to any of my workshops, my slides are usually my guide. So I don't like to spend too much time on the slides. So I will kind of quickly go through some of the slides just to highlight some of the features. And that's really how I use the slides. But at the end of the day, I really like to get into the application because that's where, in my view, we're going to see the overall or the greatest value. And at least then you can see, what I'm doing, how I'm moving, from one tool to another, and really the overall look and feel. Okay, so after looking at a few slides, I'll look at a few features quickly just to show you what it looks like in the tool. Then I'll do a use case, okay, a general use case, one or two use cases, and then we'll do a lab. So that's basically how we're going to run with that. Okay. Your application launchpad login and password. I don't think I provided that. I'll provide that with you now. So the login, for anybody that's there at that window, the login is simply student, all lowercase. And the password is workshop with a capital W, 1 exclamation mark. And that should get you into the NSP launchpad window. I'll just bring it up here so you see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's the NSP Launchpad. So once you enter the login and password, here's where you should get to. So keep in mind, your own Launchpad, and yes, like I said, if you're running the NFM-P install version, right, a 19 or 20 or whatever it is, you still should see these applications. Now, they may look a little bit different. These icons may look a little different depending on, what release you're running. So don't be too alarmed there. Also, don't be alarmed if you don't see a lot of these other icons. Okay, so a lot of these other icons, maybe they're due to different install types or different features that are enabled depending on the license key, for example, and depending on the installation type. But what we're going to focus on is the three applications called fault management, network supervision, and service supervision. So really, to go into any of these applications, well, of course, we just simply click on the application icon, and then up pops the application itself. So while that's popping up, I'll start talking about the fault management application overview. So what are we going to see here in the fault management application overview? So what I like to really mention is about what we're going to see is really the difference between the NFM-P Java UI. So right off the hop, what I find is probably the most important thing out of the fault management application, and actually out of all these applications, is the robust correlation engine. Now, I say correlation engine because from an NFM-P standpoint, you're probably used to hearing the term correlation or correlated, okay? People are well aware, if you use the NFM-P and you look at alarms, that there's things that are called correlated alarms and correlating alarms. But also keep in mind you have, affecting alarms and affected objects and all of these different objects, right? Well, basically what the fault management application does, it's a more robust algorithm that's basically able to take all that and put it basically together a lot more nicely. And it's basically right down to the root cause. So it has much better grouping And the algorithm in there is much more complex, and it's much more, well, let's say it's it's a lot better and much quicker to get to the root cause. So you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, trust me, once we get into the actual use of it. So that is a huge, huge benefit. I mean, just the ability to, when you'll see, click on an alarm and very quickly with one click, see, is it a root cause? Is it, what we will say an impacting alarm, which we'll see now in a second, because that's how it's actually called in the fault management application. It's not called, correlated. It's actually object impacts, okay? Or if it's not a root cause alarm, very quickly, what is the root cause alarm, right? And what does that do? It allows us to know whether we should, keep investigating this object that I'm on right now, or should I go and start looking at the actual root cause object? And for most people that have troubleshooted, they'll tell you right away, that's probably the hardest part, is finding out of the actual issue that they're looking at right now is what is the main thing they should be looking at, right? Because they'll probably have something with 20 or 30 or 40 alarms. And they really need to get down to, okay, what is the main alarm here? What is the root alarm, right? But they don't want to spend time on all this other stuff. So what is the main one I need to be looking at? Visualization cues and diagrams, huge, huge benefit with this application. You'll see what I mean real soon. Okay, and different perspectives. So with the dynamic alarm list, well, you basically got one perspective, right? And that's that one alarm list, and that's it. With the fault management application, you have different perspectives. Now, some perspectives are better for different issues, depending on what you're looking at. Some of it's just personal preference. One person might like, starting troubleshooting from one perspective, whereas somebody else might like a different perspective. Okay, so I'll show you the different perspectives, and then we'll go from there. Email notifications. So in the fault management application, there is the email notifications you can set up and perform, and you can get quite specific with them. So I can say, if a certain alarm gets performed or gets raised on a certain element, well, then send me an email. The other nice thing about those emails is that included in that email is a link. And if you open up that email and your device is connected online on the same network, of course, as your NSP, you can click that link and automatically pops up the fault management application with all the alarm info and impact diagrams. So it's nice and easy, if you want to get automatic email notifications to be able to jump quickly into your troubleshooting and the problem at hand. And then the final thing is programmable APIs. So we have a lot of open source REST and RESTconf APIs, and any of these REST APIs can work with any of these applications as well. Okay, if you are, and anybody that's using hands-on, if you were to go and jump into and click on that fault management application, this is what you'll see. So at the top, you'll see basically a few different views, or like I said, perspectives, which was mentioned earlier, or starting points. You see the top unhealthy NEs, the alarm list, top problems, and inspector. So we'll go down through some of these, some of them more than others. The two I'll focus on the most is going to be top unhealthy NEs and alarm list, but I will also tell you what top problems and inspector is. So first of all, top unhealthy NEs. You can see they're in bold, and this is a very, very important point, okay? And this may actually determine your starting point, but I'll also show you where inspector comes into play. This is going to show you the top 50 unhealthy NEs in your network. Okay, so keep that in mind, because I get a lot of questions where people say, well, I got thousands of routers on my network, and what is this going to look like when I have 1,000 routers? Well, it's only going to display the top 50 unhealthy NEs. Okay, so they're basically sorted where the most top unhealthy NE will always be in the top left-hand corner. Okay, and then they go from left to right across the top line. Then the second line, they go from left to right again. Okay, now, how do we determine a top unhealthy NE? Well, that's really up to us, the operator. It depends on what we select. Now, by default, the default is actually, you'll see here in the top right that I'm circling with my pointer, the total active alarms. So, which is usually the case, right? Most times, if we're having a major outage with a router and it it's causing a lot of alarms or an influx of alarms, a lot more than any other router, well, we're probably going to want to go and take a look at it. And that's what the default is here. So let's imagine an outage all of a sudden, major outage, a ton of alarms. Right away, what's going to happen, okay, we're going to see, and this is where the visual cue comes in. If we're looking at the top unhealthy NEs, we're going to see, one of those routers, which in this case right now is R5, jump to the top of that list or jump higher up in that list. Okay, and using these KPIs, these little tiny things here that I'm circling, this number sign, and then this sign here, and then this sign here, these are little KPIs that if we do a mouse over, it tells us what they are. Well, this one here is the total number of active alarms, I believe. Yes, it is. So this is the total number of active alarms, and right away this number is going to jump up high. So this is what I mean by visual cues, okay? So this tells us right away, hey, R5, possibly a major outage, something big, a lot of alarms just happened, and again, lets us know. Now, if you're in the dynamic alarm list window, yeah, you're probably going to get a lot of alarms that are going to pop up, which say, site R5, but keep in mind, you may be getting other alarms there as well. You're also probably well aware that if there's a lot of things going on in your network, that dynamic alarm list window may be constantly scrolling. So it also may be easy to, miss something as well. So this is very nice because if the problem is still there, and it is still one of the most major issues in your network right now, it's going to really stay up here on the high side. And it's really not going to go anywhere. I mean, it might fluctuate between some of these other routers, but it's still going to be one of the, the highest alarming routers. Okay, so just kind of looking at this is a great starting point if you want to look at it from a, NE type view, sort of a top unhealthy NEs, right? So starting point based on NEs. What are the top NEs with the most amount of alarms? You can see you can also sort this list or have this list sort by other things. You can say, well, you know what, if you use acknowledgement, well, I don't want it by total number of active because maybe some of those active alarms are already acknowledged by my operators. So in that case, well, I only want to know about the unacknowledged alarms. And you can actually do that. There's a switch here on the right-hand side. You could just switch and you could say, you know what, only sort it by total number of unacknowledged alarms or impacts, which we'll talk about further now in a second. That's that whole correlated that I talked about there earlier. Okay. Another thing I'll mention is, and this is a great way to sort of lessen the amount of overall routers or focus on one main area of the top NEs, right? Because yes, I understand your network might have, thousands of routers, but the other thing I also understand is that most networks, especially the larger ones, will have those networks separated into groups, right? So everything is usually not at the top level of the network. They might have a group per city or a group per region or a group per, whatever it is. And you can see here on the top left of the top unhealthy NEs, we can now say to only show the NEs for particular areas. So there's some automatic filters we can do. One is by product, right? So you can say, only show me the 7750s, for example. One is chassis type, unlocked only. But to be honest, one of the biggest ones I find that are usually used is topology group, especially for a larger customer who may have NOCs in certain area. And that NOC is only responsible for a particular group of routers or a topology group of routers. So now those operators, for example, can go in and they can select the topology group that they are responsible for, right? So now they can be sure they're only looking at those routers that they are responsible for. And of course, it's only going to show the top 50 from that group of routers or from that topology group. Okay, each of the individual tiles, okay, gives you initial information that you can see. You can also open them up for a little bit more details. Really, it's just talking about the alarms, okay, because, if we looked at this, we could see 43 alarms, but if we open it up, it'll say, how many critical, major, and so forth. Really just an information thing. One other thing I do like to point out here, though, is this here I'm circling. So is the fact that, and I know it's, a lot of you, right, still, you know the CLI, you like using CLI, and that's fine. If you did want to jump into going into the router right away and taking a look, that's fine as well. And there is an option there that you can easily open a network element session to the router as well, okay? There it is there. Okay. One other thing I'm going to mention, I think this might be another slide while I'm here, but is the alarms. So from, say, R5 that we've seen that is the top unhealthy NE, most likely what we'll want to do is quickly jump in and look at those alarms and see if we can figure out, what is that major outage or where are all these alarms coming from? And a user is actually given 3 options on any of these icons. So if you're in the Launchpad right now, if you just kind of do a little mouse over and you take a little look here, it'll tell you what all 3 of these are. One of them is to quickly look at all the current alarms. One of them is to look at all the historical alarms, and the other one is to look at a merged alarm list. So that's going to give you all the current and all the historical. So this is nice because I can, as a user, with one click of a button, I can simply now go in and look at all the alarms for R5. Now again, pointing back to the dynamic alarm list, you'll be well aware for me to do that, I need to have, first of all, I probably need to create a filter, and then I need to load the filter. So this is almost like sort of automatic filters that are there for us to use with one simple click of a button, right? I can look at current, again, historical, or merged, and we'll look at a lot more of that now in a minute. Okay, one other little bonus I always like to point out. So let's say now, for example, we're looking again at the top unhealthy NEs. You'll notice here that in a lot of these applications, there's a nice export feature. Okay, it's always nice to have something looking at the application, but there's lots of times when I want to save this info just in case something changes on my screen, right? Or I want to save it and send it to somebody to show them what everything looks like. And because of that, there's a lot of great export features. So some applications actually have an exporting feature from the visual representation or image that you can see on screen, which is this case right here. It's basically saying, you know what, if you want to take this top unhealthy NE's view and export it to a CSV file. So now you have all that data, okay, saved on a local CSV file. We'll also see the export now in a minute with respect to the alarm list. Okay, so this is what I mentioned about viewing the alarms for specific NEs. So here we are back to R5, and you can see with one simple click of a button, so this user here, okay, probably clicked on one of these here, so current, historical, or merged, and as soon as they open that, okay, we get the current alarms for R5. It tells you automatically, so you can see here, there's an automatic filter applied. There's a back button, which will quickly bring me back to the top unhealthy NEs. Not only that, within this view over here, the alarm list selector, I can very quickly, I don't have to go back to the top unhealthy NEs, because if I want to go from current alarms to historical alarms, I can do that quite quickly in this view. Okay, we're going to talk about these alarm lists a bit more later on, but before we get there, I always like to bring up the inspector view. So what I'm going to do for this actually is, now that I've done sort of the top unhealthy NEs, I'm going to go right to my application. Okay, and we can see here now in this application, we have, this is our network we're going to be working with. And right now we have SR3 that's showing a top of total active alarms, right? Here's our sort. Total active alarms of 12. And because we're sorting by that, sure enough, like I said, if you do a mouse over, it tells you what the KPIs are. The total number right now is SR3 with 12. Now, I can guarantee you if I were to go in the network and create a big outage, okay, say on R4, R4 is going to quickly jump, and we will see this in the use case and the labs, okay? R4 will jump to the top left of this list or somewhere higher in this list, okay, letting us know that there's more alarms there. Okay, now, this is all fine. Now, one thing I want to tell you about the inspector view. Let's say, for example, right now that in this view, maybe I do have more than, a couple uses the inspector view. Let's say I do have more than 50 NEs, right? So let's say I have 100 NEs. And all of a sudden now, like I said, I'm only showing the top 50. You'll notice that from this view, let's say I have a router that's SR, 100. It's not here. And maybe it's not here because it's not considered one of the top unhealthy NEs, or the 50 top unhealthy NEs. So there's only a couple ways I can really focus in on those alarms. One, yes, I could go to the entire alarm list, which we'll talk about more in a bit, which really looks similar to the dynamic alarm list. This is all the alarms in the entire network. And from here, I could, yes, create or load a filter for, SR100. The other thing I could do is go to what's called the inspector view. Now, the inspector view, the main purpose for the inspector view is really for root cause analysis, okay? And I'll tell you why, because I mentioned that the top unhealthy NEs view will change. Okay, so let's say if I'm investigating an outage, and all of a sudden while I'm investigating that outage, something else happens. And that shifts my NEs around all over the place again. Okay, well, that could indeed become confusing, because then I look back and I say, well, where is SR3 right now? It's shifted. But if I now know that I have a problem right away, say it's between SR3 and say SR2, for example, and maybe SR4 that I want to troubleshoot and inspect, what I can do right away is I can go to the inspector view and I can now build my own fixed view. Okay. And I will know that this view will not change. So that's why we say it's for root cause analysis. Okay, so it's going to allow me to do a root cause analysis between 3 of these routers, knowing that nothing's really going to change there. Okay, that view is fixed for me, and it's not going to change unless I manually change it. So what I can do is I can say, like I said, I can say, SR3, and you can see these routers being added here. Okay, SR4, for example, you can see how I can go on, and you can actually remove these. Now, because it's root cause analysis, which lots of root cause analysis, if you're getting really deep into it, lots of times you may want to go back in time, okay, or you may want to correlate with something back in time, or go back in time and see if, maybe it happened before. And because of that, they give one option, which is merged alarms. But what I can do is, you can see now, I can quickly go from the merged alarms. Notice it says past 1 hour. This is for SR3. Okay, I can say past 30 days. I can say whatever. Okay, and I can quickly go back and forth now between SR3 and SR4. Okay, and we're not seeing anything past hour because I haven't implemented any new issues in the past hour, and I will be. But now you can see I can quickly go back and forth, and I can do my investigation between SR4 and SR3. And again, I know this view is not going to change. Okay, so really the inspector view is great for sort of, okay, I've pinpointed I have a big issue in my network, or I had an issue that happened in the past, right? And now I want to do a root cause analysis with it. And again, it might be difficult to do that here. If I know the exact routers that I want to do that between, especially if these routers are changing, or one of the routers pop up on the list because it's within the top 50, but then it jumps off the list and I can't find it no more because now it's no longer in the top 50. Okay, so keep that in mind. The inspector is really good for that, and that's exactly what the reason that it's for. Okay, you could also see this is a great button because if I am doing a root cause analysis, well, of course, like I said, you may want to jump in and do CLI for whatever reason. So we also give that option as well. So you can look at alarms, you can jump in and look at CLI, and you can really kind of go back and forth between, those 2, 3, 4, 5 routers, whatever it is that you're doing your root cause analysis. Okay, and you can see here I can just remove, so it's fairly simple. All right, so but overall, view is similar to top unhealthy NEs, just more for root cause analysis. Okay, back to my top unhealthy NEs here. I'll just show from the slide. There's the export button. All right, there's the sort, total active, total unacknowledged, impact counts. Okay, and so forth. So, depending on how my network is set up, if I select any of these, my list of routers may change. There you go. So that actually did a little change because now I'm sorting by impact counts. But really, it's a personal preference. What are you looking for? I don't really have anything acknowledged in my network in this network, but if I did, I can go ahead and do, total unacknowledged or whatever. Now, here's the active. let's say, for example, in our topology, we actually do, I do have a few groups created. I have a core network, an east to west, and the overall network itself, which is the top level network. But let's say, for example, I just want to look at the core, which is 4 routers in my network, and that's why I'm quickly seeing all 4. So you can see I can very quickly switch depending on, what topology group I'm actually responsible for. Okay, and just to show you again how all this looks instead of looking at slide, right? More details. Okay, less details. There's your open any session. And just to show you how quick it is, I'm just actually go back to the area where there's more routers. You can see if I hover over this, I can quickly look at current alarms for SR3. Here's my current alarms. There's my alarm switching. Okay, if I want to go from current to merged, okay, or historical, right? But you can see just by a click of a back button, I can go from R3 to SR2, okay, and so forth. Okay, so just going through some slides. You'll probably see me skip over some slides, like I said, because I'd rather show this through the UI. So all right, let's take a look at the top problems view. So the top problems view, again, similar to, unhealthy NEs in a way where it basically gives the visual representation of, it's a sorting mechanism, right? So in the top unhealthy NEs really sorted what? Well, top unhealthy NEs from depending on what option we selected, all right? So total active alarms. Now the top problems, think of it as a way, and I've seen this lots of times where somebody will say, look, I got this alarm in my network, that is always being raised, or it seems to be, or a few alarms in my network that are, they're always getting raised. It's filling up my dynamic alarm list and so forth. And sometimes, like I said, if your dynamic alarm list is constantly scrolling, it might be hard to figure out these types of alarms. So if you are interested in knowing, well, what is that alarm, or what are those alarms that are, being raised a lot in my network that I probably want to, pinpoint and focus a bit more time on. That's exactly what this top problems overview is. So yeah, there's ways you could figure this stuff out, again, using the dynamic alarm window and lots of filters and alarm statistics, but trust me, it's not as quick as using this view. So all that work is basically done for you through algorithms, basically in this window. So if you click on the top problems, this is what you're going to see. So you see a visual bar graph, okay, and each of these bars represent over on the right-hand side an alarm. Now, what this displays and the sorting options, okay, very similar to top unhealthy NEs. Again, this is where you can customize this view depending on what you want to see. Okay, so notice that the sorting option is, again, very similar or quite similar to the top unhealthy NEs, where we can have total alarm count. There's total occurrences. Okay, so total alarm count is the total active alarm count. Total occurrences is the total number of time that this alarm has occurred. And this is since the alarm count, the overall alarm count itself has been reset. Okay, so total number of active, total number of occurrences, and network elements. And this is an interesting one. Maybe you just want to see, hey, is there an alarm out there right now that, is on a lot of my routers? So it's spanning across, my network in a big way. Okay, so maybe that's something you would rather focus on. Okay, also notice that I can actually filter on the alarms. Maybe I only want to focus on, major alarms or minor alarms or critical alarms, or I want to look at all of them. I don't care if they're minor or whatever they are. I want to see the ones that are, causing a lot of, basic noise in my alarm list. What are the big alarms that are getting raised all the time? So this is the view where I can do this. And really, you can see here, sorry, I'll go back. You can see here from the list, it automatically does this for us. So, an individual can come in here right now and they can see that this alarm, we can't see it right now. We'll see it once I go to the application. But very quickly, they can see, hey, you've had an alarm that has 59 occurrences, which we can see is quite larger than the next alarm to it. So, this network obviously has an alarm type that is getting raised, much, much more, or an occurrence much, much higher than anything else in this entire network. And very quickly, that's what this application does for us, and it picks it out. Okay, a couple other display preferences here, really just stating what do we want to see. Most people I will say, want to see the actual alarm name, and that's because, that's what they see in the alarm window or the dynamic alarm window. Typically, people will see that alarm name first, right? Whether it's, called a link down alarm or equipment down alarm or whatever it is. So most people will probably pick alarm name. However, some people will like to show the probable cause. Probable cause is always great for troubleshooting. Lots of times the probable cause will, help lead you to what the problem may be. So someone might say, you might want to see the probable cause instead of the actual alarm name or specific problem as well. So these are really just attributes in the alarm that you'd rather view, or what would you rather view in that list? It's really all it is. Again, this is just all different ways of customizing the actual view. Now, okay, from an investigation standpoint, though, this slide here kind of shows, well, where would we go from here, right? So let's say we're looking at that nice list, and that's great. Now, look, it's told me, well, I got an SDP binding alarm that was, occurred 16 times in my network. I got 16 of them now that are currently active, and it's quite a few, right? And they're also service-affecting alarms. So I really love this part, because notice this KPI right here, network elements. So what this is telling me is I have 16 current active SDP down alarms, but it's actually it's not focused on one network element. This is reaching across multiple network elements right now. These alarms are. And you can see quickly this is telling me this is active right now on 5 different network elements. So it's giving me quite a piece of information here from a troubleshooting standpoint. The other nice thing now is what I can do if the user actually clicks on this. What happens is that it'll jump right into what's called the NE matrix. So if you come over here to the right, you can see number 1 is click to view a list of the NEs with the active alarm. So the first thing I do, as soon as I click on this, it goes, hey, here are the 5, what it reports here, routers that this alarm is currently active on. So this is great. So it's kind of like the next step, right? It's quite intuitive. All I do is one simple click, and it automatically sort of puts me to the next troubleshooting step. Okay, let's go look at the routers that they're on. And now from here, I get to decide what my next step is, right? Which generally is going to be the third step. And that is, well, let's look at the alarms, right? Let's go to the alarm and see what it says. Let's look at the details, for example. So here, now what I do is I get to see the 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, routers that alarm is on, and I can choose which router I wish to investigate first. Now, in this case, who knows? I may choose to investigate R5. Why? Because it's reporting 6 of those alarms as opposed, 3 or 5 or whatever. But as you can see, this may change depending on what type of problem it is. So I just want to highlight, though, like I said, the intuitive of being able to step from, a troubleshooting step 1, which is very quickly identifying a top alarm in our network, to one click, okay, what routers are those on, to one more click to basically saying, okay, here are those alarms on that router, which again is an automatic filter that one would have to create through the NFM-P or dynamic alarm window. Okay? Okay, so now that you've seen some of these alarm lists, you've seen me looking at them through the top and healthy NEs. I've stated we can look at alarm lists there. I've stated we can look at alarm lists, from all the other views. Let's talk about the alarm list view. I'll try and get through this fairly quickly because I want to get through, I know time is going. I want to get through a quick use case. And then a quick lab, and so we can move on to the other applications. Okay, so let's talk about the alarm list. And the biggest thing I always want to talk about is really the difference of the alarm list you're going to see in this application And when I say alarm list now, like I said, there's different alarm lists. So if there's, any of these type of alarm lists, if I go current, merged alarms. Well, what you do notice here in this application is there's an alarm list button up top or menu item up top. And by default, this is giving me the global alarm list. So really what we're seeing here, guys, this is, and I say almost, it's not identical. This is very similar to or almost equivalent to the dynamic alarm list. Okay. So basically, this is kind of like looking at this guy here, but with a lot more benefits. Okay. And we'll point out what those benefits are and how it makes it much, much easier. Okay, so let's go back to my slide here quickly. This is some of the things we're going to look. I'll show you some of them, not all of them. So more efficient alarm list filtering. I'll show you quickly what I mean by that. More efficient viewing of alarm details. Love that one. That one definitely ticks off or gets rid of a common, pet peeve of Java UI user. Watched filters, I really like that one as well. I'll show you the benefit of that. Exporting specific alarms, any import specific alarms squelch. Intuitive visualization approaches, that's probably the biggest one, which is the actual, that one and the next one, the one-click root cause. I kind of put two of them together. It's sort of a one-click root cause or impact analysis. And then the one-click affected object navigation. So really what you're almost seeing here is a list of sort of the taking a bunch of things from the Java UI and really, making it much more efficient or better. So let's just go on here. So, okay, one thing you need to know, similar to the dynamic alarm list, Java NFM-P UI, yes, this global alarm list is dynamically updated. The reason why I'm saying this is keep in mind, this is the global alarm list, dynamically updated. Any of these current alarm lists, okay, when I hit current alarms from here, this is me saying, show me the current alarms for this current snapshot. Okay, so this stuff is not dynamically updated. You would actually have to refresh it at a later point in time. Now, me coming out of it and going back into it definitely refreshes it. But the global dynamic alarm list, okay, just like the dynamic alarm list on the Java UI is dynamically updated. So as soon as you change something or something changes, that gets updated as well. Filters. Okay, so the Java UI, you can create alarm filters, and you can also do that, of course, using the application or using the alarm list here. Okay, so we can see there's save filters, which there's actually some already created. I did create some of these. Okay, or you can actually go in and create advanced filters. Now, I don't really have time to get into creating advanced filters, but I will say they're very similar to the Java NFM-P UI. I will say probably easier as well, but definitely similar things like with the Boolean approach. You can say like, contains or and or values and things of that nature that you can definitely use, again, similar to the Java NFM-P. But one thing I do want to mention, I think this comes later, but I'd like to mention right now, seeing I'm mentioning filters, is this guy here, and watch filters. Now, I'm going to switch over to the Java NFM-P. Okay, we're all aware that the Java NFM-P, I can have many filters, and from my drop-down list here, I can quickly switch between multiple filters. But what if I wanted to actually bigger networks have some very, very specific filters, and they have a lot of them too. And what if I wanted to monitor multiple filters at once and know if, the alarm count went up on, say, alarms from one filter or another filter or another filter. So yeah, I know, right? I can, if I want to. There's technically, I guess, a way to do it through Java NFM-P UI. I could say load one filter here. I can open up another dynamic alarm list window, right? I can open, another one here, for example, right? Of course, right? But I mean, really, once you start doing this, while, you're filling up your screen with all these dynamic alarm windows, you got a lot of colors going on here, that's fine. So yeah, technically, you can do that. And I could, I guess, look at the alarm count for each of those filters, but you can see where I'm going here. Depending on how many filters here, it can get quite messy and fill up your entire screen quite easily And then I still needed to monitor my dynamic alarm list, right? Because, I can't forget about the main dynamic alarm list either, can I? So what I can do, show you the difference here now. This is my alarm list. And that's why we have this thing over here called watched filters. What this allows me to do is it allows me to continue to monitor my dynamic alarm list or my global alarm list, or it could be just an alarm list with a main filter. It could be a filter of a bunch of routers that, a NOC is responsible for example. But I can continue to quickly, in the same window, monitor alarm counts across multiple filters. And then I can quickly change to those filters. So let me show you what I mean. Okay, so here we go. I can add, if I have filters already created, so you'd have to have your filters created. And what I can do here is, and I'm just going to quickly add all of these filters just to give you the overall effect. So now you see what I've done here. Okay, so now, again, I have all of my alarms, which will still happen. If alarms get raised, I still see it. And over here now, what you don't realize is I'm actually dynamically monitoring the alarm count, but only the alarm count that matches those filters. So this is very neat because let's say if I were to go in on SR1 right now, you can see I have SR1 and SR1 critical. If I were to jump on SR1 right now and create a major outage or something that's going to create a bunch of critical alarms, what I'm going to see is I'm going to see all these numbers pop up nice and high. Okay, so you'll notice that now I'm able to quickly monitor multiple things. I can very easily monitor multiple different alarm filters. Okay, not only that, let's say I see SR1 critical here jump up at a bunch of these different values all of a sudden. I just simply click on the filter itself. And now you can see, instead of having multiple dynamic alarm windows, right? I can quickly go there. I click on that X over there, and I'm quickly back to the overall global dynamic alarm window. Okay, so you can see the big difference here, right? Much more convenient, everything in one window, not multiple windows popping up. And I can now watch the alarm count, okay, across multiple filters and quickly switch to them as well. Okay, you can see some customization here about what you want to view, okay, as well. Really just adding up, condition info, different types of alarms. But basically, that's what this watch filter is. I love that. It's an excellent feature. Okay, just heading back to my slides here, moving forward. So that was actually coming next. That's good. Sorting. So a lot of similar actual features as the dynamic alarm list. So you can actually, right click on any of these for sorting. You can use filters, but there is one, and I will say there's a couple different columns here. One which I find is definitely the most useful is called impact. Okay, so this is, we'll start talking about impacts now soon. This is the whole sort of correlation thing where this is going to tell us, how great of a magnitude our problem is, So generally, if you see an alarm, which is kind of, zero impacts, well, it's more of a local type problem, or, it's a problem, something happened, and it's not really affecting anything else. So give me an example. That could be, say, for, maybe it's an empty port, that I've maybe brought up online, but there's absolutely nothing connected to it. There's no links. There's no, there's no access ports. There's really nothing on it. But yet maybe it's operationally down because I don't have a cable in it or so forth, yeah, you'll get one alarm. Right? You'll get one alarm that the port is down, but if there's nothing really on it, or if it's not affecting anything, you won't see any impacts. So that's what impacts are. The different side of that is, well, let's say a network port goes down, or actually, the fact, let's say an access port goes down, and that access port is, tons of live customers, for example. Well, what's going to happen is that I'm going to see the similar equipment down, or port down alarm, but the biggest difference being is that this impact count is going to be severely high. It's going to be very high. Okay, so again, visual cue, right? Because an impact count, it tells me right away if I see that number high or very high. Well, it tells me that that problem is now, wide impacting. It's a very high magnitude, and most likely it's something I'm going to want to jump on right away. And that saves me a lot of work because now I can use that from a priority standpoint, because obviously we can have more than one problem popping up at the same time, right? Especially in larger networks. So that really helps me, sort of focus my troubleshooting efforts maybe in something that is a much greater magnitude. Okay, alarm details. We'll come back to those impacts now in a second. This is another one area that I love as opposed to the dynamic alarm list. I've seen this millions of times. Let's say, I'm an individual and I'm troubleshooting this area in my network. Well, I got a bunch of criticals here and, I have a link down. Or typically what happens is, you get a user and they're doing this and they're opening up the alarm, right? And they're looking at, details, and they're checking correlating alarms and affected objects, and they're reading everything here and looking at details, like I said, and info, looking at probable cause. But then, lots of times we get alarms in groups, right? And then they say, well, hold on, now, this alarm got raised around a similar time, so I think I need to look at this one as well. And then, well, hold on, this one also got raised at a similar time, and you could see where I'm going, and we end up with all these different windows open, and what happens then? Well, I might get confused because now, which alarm am I on? Or I close a window by accident, and really, especially if you have multiple alarms involved, it can get confusing. So what the application did is it really cut down on all of these extra windows popping up, which you constantly need to move. And it just makes life a lot easier for us with, one window and a bunch of drop downs. So over to the right here now, we see all the details of our alarms. And you can see, let's say probable cause, for example, right? Here's probable cause, the general tab, and I can, very quickly, you can see here now, right? As I click on any of these alarms, you can see the details on the right. It's much, much quicker, right? I don't have to double click on something, wait for the window to pop up. And I've seen sometimes, depending on resources, where the window might take an extra second to pop up. And, every second counts in troubleshooting. So, this could definitely save you time. Also confusion, because, when you do click on something, you can see the line is actually highlighted, right? So, you won't get confused about what alarm you're looking at. Okay, so this is very, very nice and much more cleaner than the dynamic alarm list window. Okay, so looking at alarm details. Exporting alarms, another quick one I always want to mention. Lots of times it's, like I said, the network can change. Lots of times you want to save the alarms. Lots of times we may want to export the alarms as CSV and send it to a colleague or, a manager or whatever it is. Currently today, there is an exporting feature. However, if I actually do this, if I save the file, I'm going to get all 88 alarms. So basically you're exporting all the alarms in the dynamic alarm window. I don't have the ability to actually select or pinpoint certain alarms. The only way I can actually do that is I'd have to go and create a filter. Again, you can see there's ways to do it, but much harder. Depending on the issue, that filter might have to get very, very, very complex. In the application itself, well, we've simplified that for you, and now all you need to do is hold your control button or your shift button, whatever it is, to select certain alarms, and you can see here export selected. And very quickly, all I'm going to do there, you can see it downloaded. Okay, download the alarm list, and this, and that's it. So there it is, nice 3 alarms. I don't have to worry about, again, actually creating an advanced filter or anything like that. So we really simplified the exporting feature. Okay, and I'll show you again later where the export comes into play, and it's very beneficial. Individual alarm options, I don't touch on this too much. To be honest, they're very quite similar to, right-clicking on a alarm in the dynamic alarm list. But of course, wanted to mention that they are there. There might be a couple extra ones there. Just don't really have time, again, to go into all of them. Just really want to show you the generally how the application works. So root cause and impact. So we are going to focus on this, and this is where we're going to get into a use case in the actual lab that really show the benefit of this application. So like I said, back on the dynamic alarm window, yes, we do have correlating and affected and all that stuff. You've probably seen the same thing. I've seen issues where, one issue, it'll have correlating alarms, which sometimes it helps to get to the problem. Sometimes it doesn't help that much. Sometimes it helps partially troubleshoot the problem. Whereas another time for what might seem like a very similar issue, there's no correlating alarms, but there's affected objects and there's affecting alarms and there's, so there's kind of quite the difference in what a problem may look like and whether, should you be looking at correlating or affected or whatever it is. So the impacts really simplify that because now everything looks, well, basically the same. So everything is grouped under impacts. And what we can see here is, of course, it's a parent-child relationship. And the biggest thing we're looking at here is in a diagram, you will typically see a root cause alarm. And then that root cause alarm will lead to many, many what's called impacts. Okay, so no more, affected, affecting, all of this stuff popping up. All this stuff is now nicely grouped together. Okay, across affecting and correlated and whatever, nicely correlated into what's called impacts. So you can see this little example here. We had a root cause of alarm of an LSP path down leads to many impacted alarms, affecting a tunnel, affecting a binding, affecting a service site, and who knows? And that's just, for one problem right there. Okay, looking at the alarm list, what will happen is that basically any alarm in the alarm list, you'll see some of these options, these little icons, if you hover over any of these alarms. Okay, and one of these icons, one is says show root causes, and one is show impact diagram. Okay, so I'll go to what I'm going to do now actually, and I don't mind you knowing what I'm going to do. I'm just going to, let's see, I'll go in and actually, let me just pick a port. I'm just going to pick a port for now. I'm just going to shut it down. I know this port has some stuff configured on it. And this will cause some alarms for us, right? Okay, so like I said, dynamically updated. What you see here right now, so I actually already have my alarm list sorted by impact count. Now, I believe by default, it's going to be by last time detected. Let's go back to this right here, last time detected. Now, sometimes you may see that the alarm at the top might have the highest impact, but due to timing, it might not be. Sometimes I've seen where the highest impacting alarm is quite further down the list. And like I said before, right, in a larger network, this could be continually scrolling, right? I mean, it's pretty static right now. We don't have much going on in the network. So one thing that can be done right off the hop, if you want to look for, highest impacting alarms or something with a greater magnitude, is you can sort by impact. Okay, so now you can see right away, this lets you know, what alarms are of great magnitude. And over here, I can say, well, show me the root cause, okay, or show me the impact diagram. Show me the root cause is really just basically going to pop up the root cause itself. It's not going to give you much. It's just automatically the root cause. You notice it doesn't show me any impacts. Probably the biggest reason for that is that some of these impact diagrams can get very large. Okay, of course, if it's, if I had 1,000 SAPs on this router, well, the impact diagram is going to be very, very large. So, to basically alleviate that issue, we can just say, show me the root cause. But what I can do is if I want an entire picture of this, I can say, show me impacts, and look how quickly, and a nice diagram, what this tells me. So right now, with one click of a button, I can now tell you that I have a port, which on SR1, 1116, okay, it's down, okay, administratively down for that matter. I can click on here, gives me all the information of that alarm if I want. But not only that, notice that it's service affecting. And I can see that right away because I have all of these access interfaces down. This is extremely important because if you're in a dynamic alarm window, for example, and all of a sudden Okay, most times I've seen a lot of people that they get an access interface down or something with a service. You have something monitoring services. They see that access interface down. I've seen many a times when people go in and they start looking at that access interface, and multiple of those access interfaces, they start looking all over the place for the problem. We can see here, we can spend tons of time on the access interface. The problem is not with that. Okay, it's actually with the physical equipment in this case. And all of this is nicely laid out for us with one click of a button. Okay, also, I mentioned exporting. Okay, I can also export this data to CSV as well. And this is great as well, because what this does is not only does it export everything that's there, but it's also sorted nicely for me. You can see right at the top is the root cause, and all of the impacts are down below. So now I know that all of these customers here, every single one of these customers or these access ports are affected because of this problem. And I can get somebody on this right away, and I can let everyone know that once this is fixed, all of these customers will come back online. Okay, we'll close that off. Okay, I also want to show you this. Perfect. So here's another example. Okay, let's say you're looking in this list. Say this impact count was not there. All right, let's say if it was not there, like in the dynamic alarm list, for example. This is kind of what I'm getting at. So all of a sudden we see these layer 2 access interface alarms, and we see these other alarms, right? I've seen many a time where somebody will go again and they'll double click and they'll start focusing on the VPLS access interface alarm, right? Because it's a service affecting alarm. Well, watch what I can do here. I can quickly say show impacts, and very quickly notice how the access interface down alarm is actually an impact. It's not even the root cause. So this tells me right away, I'm not going to waste my time looking at this access interface. Okay. With one click of a button, this tells me, hey, forget about this. This is the problem. This is the root cause. This is the reason why this access interface is down. You need to focus on this alarm here. Okay. So nice and quick. Now the final part, and for anybody following along with an application, don't open the Java UI. If you did anyways, it'll come up. But now watch this, the final part, and I love this part. So even if you found this through the NFM-P UI, well, what do you need to do then? Either, view affected object, but then you'd actually have to go back, so if you hit the view affected object, you might get to it. Or, you got to go looking for the port on the navigation window. Or when you'll see when we get into services, you actually got to go find the service and all. Now, if you have the Java UI open, okay, I can click that button there, the show affected object button, and you can see right away, look what happened. It's like automatically happening on the left-hand side. It's like somebody was automatically clicking the Java UI for me, right? And that happened automatically. I didn't do any of that stuff. So automatically, everything opened up here, and I'm automatically on the exact window or the object of that root alarm. Okay, and we can see the actual alarm itself was administratively down. I turn up. Scrolling back. And you can see it's gone. Okay, very quickly fixed. Okay, so again, just kind of giving you an example there on how useful this can be. Okay, one other I'll show you. I want to show you a different starting point for that exact same type of problem. Just going to go back and shut this down again. Okay, so that's the alarm list. The alarm list also has a couple different views you can look at. And this is really getting into the visual side of things. One is called the alarm distribution. One is alarm hierarchy. I usually show the alarm distribution, for example. I'll mention the other one. So what we're seeing here is a visual representation of the alarms in our network that have impacts associated to them. Okay, so any alarm that has alarm impacts associated to them, you're going to see here. Okay, just like in other areas, I can filter this for a certain topology group, for example. date ranges, whatever. I'm just showing everything right now. And typically on a larger network, you might want to do a filter. So for your topology group, okay. And I'll show you when I fix this. But when I fix this, you just see the whole alarm distribution would just be like this, little tiny, smaller, squares or whatever they are, rectangles. And really all that's telling me is that the inner rings are the root cause alarms, and any on top of it is an impact. So you can see really, what this would show me without this big problem right here. Typically, it would say, well, in your network right now, the most you have, the biggest problem you have is one root alarm with only one impact associated to it. Okay, so, that might tell me that maybe a link is down, but I don't see anything else like, maybe OSPF alarms or anything like that. So it's probably not much on that port whatsoever. It doesn't seem like it's affecting my IGP or anything like that, because those alarms would actually be here as well. But as soon as something bigger goes down, this will happen. You'll see something happen like this in your network. Now, kind of tough to see on my network, but I do have a slide here to show you in a second. Really what it'll look like with more alarms in your network. But what you will see is you'll see that inner root cause will get much, much bigger. And now what you see is a lot more impacts associated with that root cause. Okay, so that's telling me obviously that, wow, something big has happened here. So let me quickly show you the slide. Here we go. So just kind of giving you an example of what this would look like. So obviously the blue line is something that we just put there on a slide. So let's say for generally, your network might look like this, for example. You might have some smaller ones that maybe pop out a little more, but then all of a sudden, something really big happens in the network. And right away, you can see that real big problem, and there's actually a lot of impacts. This is definitely something that's really big. It really jumped out at us. Okay. So really telling us, hey, look, you've got something that happened in your network, which is obviously the root cause alarm here on the inner, that has caused all of these critical alarms or all these impacts. So right away, right, again, visual representation, it allows us or tells us, hey, you might want to start troubleshooting this. So the next step is simple. Okay. We basically just select any of these. Okay, and we can look at the alarms if we want to. Okay, so we can say down here on the right, though, we can say show impacts. Okay, and again, this gives us, the overall representation, a bit easier to look at our impacts, right? We can now, highlight the alarm itself, look at, some of the information on the alarm. This one's quite easy, of course, just tells us this admin down, right? And then, of course, the next step is, well, I click this guy, right? Show affected object. And what happens? It pops up in the Java UI and I fix the issue. Okay. So again, really just a different starting point. I do really like this one because it definitely gives a different view where that piece sort of jumps out at you more. Okay. As opposed to, sort of the global alarm list view of the impacts. But, this is also very useful as well. From looking at it from an alarm standpoint. The alarm hierarchy, it shows you the exact same information. It's really just a different way of looking at it. Some people like the alarm hierarchy view. Some people like the distribution view. The idea here is that the outer circles are actually the root cause. You can see here if I mouse over the outer circle, that's that admin down alarm. And any circles within that circle are impacts. Okay, so but you can see here, because this one outer circle is quite large with a lot of circles on the inside, we know that it's a pretty big issue. Okay, so quick check on my slides. I might have to quickly skip over a couple things here, but I don't want to go over too much. Options, filters, show impacts, impact analysis, use case. We just quickly went through a couple quick ones there. To be honest, I think at this point, because of the timing, I'd like to get right to the lab. Okay, so just give me 1 second there, and I'm going to put this back to the way it was. That should bring everything for us back to normal. So there's what it would look like normally. Okay, so here's my global alarm list. So everything should be good right now. So what I'm going to do, I guess I could ask you all to close your eyes, but probably won't work. So I find the best is I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen for a second, and I'm going to insert a fault. And then once that fault is there, I will ask you to go ahead and start the lab. So just bear with me for a second. Okay. Excellent. Okay, I'll get back to sharing my screen. Share. Okay, so the first part of the lab actually asked you to look at the top and healthy and ease. So all I'm going to do is, so I'll give about 5 minutes. Okay, now it says, did you notice the router jump to the front? Well, you actually only would have noticed it if you were looking at that view while I inserted the fault. So if you weren't looking at the view, that's fine. But I will tell you, we're going to be focusing on the one that really jumped to the top. That's basically what I would have wanted you to notice. So if you were looking at it, a router out of the bunch would have jumped right to the top of that list. So that's basically number one. So starting from number one, if I can get you to continue, and you can see that'll ask you some questions. It asks you to try a couple things, and it's really just getting you to get used to the flow of using the application and the different actual buttons you would use. You can see the final thing. So first of all, do not fix it if you do know what the problem is. So don't fix it, please. We're all looking at this. And the last question, like I said, we're not going to bother launching the Java UI. That'll just be me. It asks you a question. So just see if you can figure out on your own how you would answer that question or what the answer is. And then we'll quickly go through them in about maybe about 5 minutes, and then we'll move on. So what I will do is I will also help monitor chat just in case while I'm waiting, actually, sorry, you need my screen to view the lab. So I guess I will leave it there.
Yeah, we'll let you know, Shane, if we see something.
Yeah, if it's something, or like I said, I'll go through this lab and the questions and things right at the end. So if anybody missed anything or forgot something, So I'll give it about 1 more minute. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at this lab. Okay, so looking at the top unhealthy NEs, right? So everyone should very easily be able to see that SR8 actually did make a jump to the top left if you were looking at it. The number of current alarms did jump up quite high to about to 18. Unacknowledged alarms, we didn't acknowledge any unless some of you did. With an impact count of high, which is 9, which is actually, again, quite larger than all the rest of them. All the rest of them 2, 0, 0, for example. So you should really saw the SR8 jump to the top. You can see the next question is, did you remember how to sort the alarm, view the current alarms for that router? Then it asks you to sort the alarm list by impact count. And do you see an alarm that has a very high impact count? So let's take a look at that. So if you remember from the workshop, from the slides, basically looking at current alarms for any of these routers is just a single click. So current alarms. Okay, and my window was automatically for sorted by impact. So if yours was time detected, you would have had to simply click on the impact. And yes, of course, we definitely see an equipment down. Okay, a little bit different than last time. There's actually a major alarm. The other one from last time use case was a critical alarm. The equipment down, an operable equipment, 1116. You can see more details here as well. Okay, so which alarm has highest impact? We just figured that out. And it says view the impact diagram. Select the alarm with the highest impact count and view the impact diagram. Then it asks, from that impact diagram, is it service affecting? Can we quickly see if this is service affecting? And if so, which services are impacted? Well, let's take a quick look at that. Okay, so here's the alarm. Let's look at the impact diagram nice and quickly, right? So this is great. We can see right away we have equipment down alarm. Is it service affecting? Well, yes, it is, right? Access interfaces are definitely service impacting. We have a link down, but look over here. We actually have right down to the service site level, actually. We have 2 service sites that are down. Looks like we have, if you look at the tooltip name there over the mouse over, we have ePipe44, or I can do a simple click and it tells me what the actual service ID is. So it looks like it's service ePipe4. And it looks like also ePipe5. So it looks like we have a couple services here that are actually involved. Okay, probably more than one service. We definitely have multiple access interfaces that are involved. Okay, let's go back to our lab. And it says export the diagram to a local.csv file. Remember, this is great to keep. Okay, so just in case something were to change or to send forward. So if you didn't remember to export, over here to the right, and you could say export data to CSV, and that should have downloaded the CSV format for you with the root cause alarm. The first entry and the impacting alarm should have been the other entries. Right back here. What is the root alarm of the issue? Well, that was that equipment down alarm. And the question asked, how can an operator quickly navigate to the properties form of the root cause? So if you notice by now, if I want to actually change something or change a configuration, I either have to go CLI on the router or I can go to the NFM-P Java UI, right? And I mentioned the quickest way to do that, and now I'll do it like I mentioned, would be simply to click on the root alarm. And there was this button here down in the bottom right-hand corner, the Show Affected Object button. Okay, so when I clicked on that, here we go, and I think I might have clicked it twice. Either way, we'll see. And then up popped the properties form for the port, basically stating the issue is here somewhere. Go from there and then start troubleshooting further. Now, this wasn't an administratively down. To be honest, the problem doesn't really matter too much here. What I actually did was I actually just changed something on the Ethernet side of things just to really, I wanted to simulate an equipment down, not an admin down, just to kind of really show the difference. The fact that it actually ended up being a major alarm, that was the root cause, and this can happen sometimes. And to me, this actually really, again, points out the extra benefit of this application, because I find, from experience, most people automatically jump to a critical and just assume that, maybe the critical is actually the root of the problem. Well, it's not always the case. You can see here we actually had a major alarm, which was really causing all the criticals. So it really points that out again, showing the benefit of the application. So all I really did here, guys, was I just enabled EFM OAM just to kind of, and all that does is that I won't get into that, but it simulates actually the same type of alarm that one will get if, say, like a cable was pulled or there was some other type of problem with the port. I just admin down, sorry. With the port, besides, say, like an admin down, for most times you'll actually get a major alarm there. You turn that off, disabled, and that should come back up for us. There we go. So that should come back up. And then what you should see, like I said, if you go out of this, right, we should see this stuff clear. Go back. And you can see as soon as you go back to the top unhealthy NEs, well, looks like SR8 jumped right down to the bottom. Okay, so it's cleared up. Okay, so just a quick use case and a quick lab. So like I said, really the different areas and the different things you can look at there. Like I said, we don't have time to get into all the different starting points, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the benefit of the fault management application. Usually this application takes the longest, so I do want to jump right into the network supervision, unless we don't have much time there, Darren, unless there's something very, very quick. Eve, anybody, something that...
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions specific to this topic or the lab. I think Eve has been answering some...
Awesome.
An unrelated question, I believe.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Okay, so like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right into network supervision application. Okay. Okay, so network supervision application. Well, obviously similar to fault management, it's launched by clicking the network supervision icon. So you can click that icon in a couple areas. For those of you that are hands-on, the easiest way, I mean, really is just to click this over here on the top right. I mean, you could go right back to the dashboard, but there's no real need. Clicking this gives you sort of a drop down of all the different applications. So just go ahead and click on network supervision application. Okay, so I'll let that do its thing, and then we'll go back to the slides here. So what are we looking at here with the network supervision? So I mentioned it's really kind of looking at a network from a different standpoint, right? So keep in mind, you're not really looking at everything here now, which is more what the fault management application is. We're starting to separate our network now. And what are we separating? Well, we're actually monitoring physical and virtual network elements across basically the entire network. Okay, so we're looking at it more from, the physical or virtual network element view. okay, focusing on that area. So if you have a group or people responsible more from that standpoint, this is definitely the application you'll want to use. However, there are other things that are also very useful in this application. We'll see that, are not just for physical and virtual. One of those being the event timeline, which I absolutely love. Fixed many a problem with it, and I'll show you how that works. And this is kind of why I said I don't want some of you cheating and moving forward in fault management, because one quick way to troubleshoot it, the fault management issue was one could have just said, oh, okay, problems on SR8, and then they could have jumped to network supervision and used the tool in there to look, which helps. But that's why I'm showing you all these applications. We use KPIs. So similar to fault management, but you're going to see a lot more KPIs in these supervision applications. And these KPIs light up, again, giving us the visual representations. You're going to start to see some areas where functionality or things that you can do in the Java UI, you can now basically do in the applications, but it's much nicer and nice cleaner. One is the equipment inventory view. When I say equipment inventory, I'm talking about sort of this navigator over here, right? So with all these drop downs and pluses and minuses and looking at port statuses, well, you can now do that as well in the network supervision application, right? Because this is where we're closely looking at the network elements itself. So it has what's called a troubleshooting map, which I actually will show in a slide or a use case as well. And then here's the biggie. I want to focus, to be honest, probably most of my time, the event timeline. It's just an unbelievable feature. It really is. So I do really want to show that app as well. I've been asked questions lots of time. Well, how can I find out, what was changed, or does the NSP keep a history of, things that were changed or anything like that? And that's exactly what this is. So we now do, show that. So I'd really like to show that. And then, of course, if analytics is there, you can cross-launch some analytics reports, but to focus more on the NFM-P sort of install, that most likely won't be there. So, okay. So one of the first things I'll mention, and generally this would be part of onboarding for fault management, which we don't really cover. We don't really have time actually to cover in this workshop. But before using any of the service or supervision applications, we use what's called views and groups. And all this is, everyone, is just a way to customize your view, and it's your own view, and basically say what you or how you want to view, or the different network elements you want to view in the supervision application and how you want to view them. So think of it as a way where I can create my own groups of routers. So, if I'm an individual and I'm only responsible for, and I know these numbers are small, but, they can be much, much larger, 5 routers on my network. Well, I can create a network supervision view for my SAM user, for my user. And, that view will only contain, the 4 or 5 routers. So then when I go in, I look at that view, and there you go. I'm only looking at what I'm responsible for. So same thing. So you can basically an area where you can customize, and you can have multiple views. And in a view, you can have different groups of routers, and you'll see it more what I'm talking about in a minute. So this individual, you can see this slide here shows 2 different type of views. The default view, by the way, is called product type. So if you actually go in, somebody onboarding, and they say, well, create the views and groups, there's a way to automatically create them if one doesn't want to manually create them. And that is by product type. So you can see right away, it does, basically, well, it's pretty straightforward. Self-explanatory, all the 7750s, and then, any other types of routers that you have in your network, it'll group them all in one. Over here to the right, though, you can see this individual made a custom view. And what they did was they simply separated all their core routers and put them in a core group, and their edge routers, and they put them in a group called edge. So again, it's really just a way of separating your network, or a way you want to look at your network. I mentioned KPIs. A lot of these KPIs will look similar to fault management you've seen, so I don't spend too much time on them. You should know by now you can hover over any of these. It'll actually tell you what they are. But from this standpoint, it's called the top level matrix view, which I'll show you in a bit. The 3 main KPIs are, one, you can see instead of now focusing on, alarms, there is one alarm thing there, but we're more closely focusing on the actual NEs itself. So this will say, look, how many NEs in this group are affected? You can actually see in this core group, well, things aren't looking too good right now, right? Because we have 100% of routers in this group are, have alarms on them. You can see there is 4 in the group, and then 4 are affected, which gives us 100% there. And then we can actually, it does give us though a count of unacknowledged critical alarms. Notice just critical alarms. So there is a little bit of info we can get from, the high level. These colors and everything, by the way, can also be changed. Of course, like most things in NSP, can be customized or changed, but these are the default values, and that's where all these bars come from, whether it's red or orange. From here, basically so again, a visual representation, and these groups will change colors, where they are on the list. Of course, highest severity or highest numbers or highest KPIs is always top left, like fault management. But from here, any of these groups, you can go in and look at the routers themselves, or you can go and look at the current alarms. So it's almost like an automatic filter. But this is what I really like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to here's my network supervision that opened up for me. And just like the slides, this is what we see here. Now, from a view standpoint, you can see here I have a view called topology groups. This is one that I created. I have 3 groups in my topology. I have 5 routers in the core, 2 routers in the east, 2 in the west. Okay, you can see everything 100% is actually showing some type of critical alarm right now. Okay, but this will actually change depending on, alarms and that nature. And this allows me to monitor all the different groups of routers. Now, what I can do from here is, well, one, I'll just show you quickly where to go if you have other views. So there's that product group. So if I were to click on that, it's going to give me, show all my 7750s and so forth. But we're going to work in this topology group for today. And this group manager is actually where I would go to manually create any types of views and groups, just letting you know that. Okay. Also with these settings over here, while I'm here, one of the big things I will tell you is timeline settings. So we're going to be using what's called the event timeline, which I mentioned before. I really enjoy. Did I not click that? There it is. If you go in here by default, it's like this. The enable event recording is actually not turned on. So I can't stress how important it is to, if you ever plan on using the event timeline, just make sure you go in and turn it on first. And these are all the different types of events that can be collected. I generally just leave everything collected. There's no real, downside of, I guess it might make your window a little cleaner. That's probably about it, depending on what happens, but you can generally leave it all selected, but you do need to say enable event recording. So if you ever go in and you don't see any, events in your event timeline, you think that there should be some events, well, probably it wasn't turned on. So if you turn it on, and then at least then at any point in the future, if any events happen on your routers, well, then they'll be actually collected in that event timeline. But from this view, this top level view, any of these groups, I can double click on them. And this allows me now to really focus closer on each of the individual network elements in the group. So again, just like top unhealthy NEs, these things will move depending on the KPIs. Okay, you can see now though, again, the KPIs focus more on the actual network element itself and the inventory. So the status of the actual objects. So we see number of cards affected, right? Number of ports affected, number of links affected. Notice I can single click if I want. It says, hey, you got 2 ports that are affected. Okay, well, I can actually single click on that, and this is awesome. So look at this. So right away, notice how it kind of opens up like an equipment inventory for me, which is the same thing as me as clicking all those plus and minuses in the Java UI. But look what it's actually done. It's actually automatically went to 2 of the ports that are down for me. You see that? 2 of the ports that are operational. So it basically did all that work for me, right? Okay, and you can actually add or disable certain, filters here. I can take it away if I wish. Okay, I can look at ports that are, locked as well or whatever, and I can kind of quickly go back here if I want. So, okay, so nice little single click to actually look at those lists. Okay, similar to fault management, if I wish, I can look at current alarms for that particular router. Okay, I can also look at here, Okay, some other little things, which we'll get into in a second. There's the event timeline, which I'll talk about in a bit. Then we have a troubleshooting map. Okay, we can also open in any session. We have more details. We have historical alarms, merge alarms. Again, all these things you've already, similar things that you've seen in the fault management. However, the new things like the event timeline and troubleshooting, troubleshooting topology, troubleshooting map is what we will focus on a lot. Now, when you're in this view, this is only one way we can look at our network elements. So over here, we have what's called the format changer. And there are other views that we can use. Okay, so the any list and link list are very straightforward. It's just list form. So instead of looking at our routers from a graphical standpoint with all the KPIs lit up, we can just look at a list form of our routers. Okay, and then from here we can just whatever. So same as link. We can look at all the links in our network. Look at all the status. We can use filters up here if we want to filter more on the list of our links. But a couple of the ones that are quite nice. So a lot of people are familiar with the topology view of the Java UI. Well, we also have a topology view in network supervision. I apologize for the slowness of my browser right now. There it is. Okay, so I don't have time to get into all the different controls of this topology view, but what I want you to notice is that there's a lot of different things you can do with this topology view as opposed to what you can do with the Java NFM-P, okay, UI. So if you go into some of these, if you ever have time on your own network or anything, you can check out the bird's eye view. You can check, opacity. You can change the lines and the clustering and then all this different type of things you can do. Again, sort of customization or to make your view a little bit easier. Just by scrolling my mouse, I can, scroll in or scroll out. Okay, but what I can see here is I obviously have something down here at network, which is one node. I have core. I have 4 nodes in the core with some connectors here. And these are connectors, by the way, which you enable in one of these options. Connected to a couple routers here, SR1, right, SR2, SR7, SR8. Now, if I want to get into look at these routers here, a single double click will actually allow me to get in there, and you can see there's my core routers. So just like, scrolling in or out, I can use my mouse wheel, for example, and there's really my overall topology view right now. Now, keep in mind, the great thing is that this stuff will update, right? So just like the Java NFM-P UI, if links go down and things of that nature, these are going to highlight red. Okay, so very similar to the Java UI. However, instead of opening up properties forms, right, like the Java UI, everything is contained within here in the one window. So what I mean is you'll notice if I click on any of this stuff, well, this is nice. It shows me I have, the one link. If there were multiple links here, it would actually show up multiple links listed down the left-hand side and would quickly tell me the status of each of these links. Because if any of these were down, one of them or two of them or whatever it is would be red. Okay, a single click on any of these quickly opens up information about those links. And then from here, and I'm not going to click, if I click this right now, this will actually bring me, if I want to edit this link in any way or change any config properties, this will, as you can imagine, it's going to quickly open up the properties form in the Java UI. So it allows me to get to the actual configuration form or the properties form of any of those links. And similar to the network element itself, if I click on the network element, you can see all the information about the network element. Okay, and from here I can go equipment inventory, current alarms, or show me the properties form in the Java UI. So here's the topology view. Okay, so I'll step right back into that core for a second, and I want to show you the other view, multi-layer view. So I really like this one. This is nice. And so you can probably tell for yourself right away what this is very useful for, right? Because now all of a sudden in one view, I see all the connections between my different views here. So mainly really my physical and my IGP. So, I've quickly seen issues where one would go into the, topology and, a physical link, say, for example, is not down, say this guy right here. Okay, this physical link might not be down, but the IGP link is. here, and you can see that it's red. So, and of course, here are the IGP sessions. So you can see, or the neighbors, you can see this quickly allows you to distinguish between whether, you have a problem that's both physical IGP or just IGP or, whatever. Okay, so just through one view. So that's what the multi-layer view is for. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to focus more on the matrix view. One other thing I'll mention here, this is sort of the summary view area. You can see here, this allows me to focus and let me know if anything happens in any of the other groups while I'm looking at the routers in the core group. Okay, so if anything were to happen to any of these routers, we see a change, specifically something that's actually called trending. There's something called a trending functionality, which I will also mention. So let me go through some of these slides, make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, so the groups, you can see just a slide there pointing out, what some of these buttons are and what they are. Trend indicator, I will mention that right now. Okay, so what is trending? Okay, well, trending is actually an additional visual cue that alerts us to let us know if anything has changed. Now, there's a trending timer, okay, which is actually gets set in the preferences. See this trend time here, 5 minutes. And that's the lowest you can go, 5 minutes. I believe, and you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the default might be 10 or 15 minutes. The lowest is 5 minutes. I know that has changed. So I believe the default's 10 or 15, but I have it down to the lowest is 5 minutes. And what happens, basically, every 5 minutes, that trending timer is doing a check, and it's checking for the number of, KPIs, basically, in that 5 minutes, looking for the number of KPIs in the past, 5-minute intervals, and trying and basically alerting you to whether the number of KPIs, the total number of KPIs, have either stayed steady or have they increased, which from our perspective, KPIs are, well, not good, because they tell us whether a card is affected, a port is affected, or a link is affected. So if a KPI goes up, well, that we know we have more things affected. Okay, so that will be an up arrow, and then it might show what's a down arrow, and that down arrow will basically says, well, the number of overall KPIs went down. So you would see that if something basically got fixed. So you had some ports that were down, and all of a sudden they came up. So that is a way for us to know that, within the last 5-minute interval, has something changed. Because really, when I'm looking at this right now, if I went away from my UI, or if I went away from my application and then I come back, I had to go grab a coffee or something. I mean, really, a lot of these routers kind of look the same. So how would I know, in the last, 5 minutes or whatever it was that I was gone away, that something really changed? So that's where that trend indicator really comes into play. So if I were to go away and then come back and something did change while I was gone, I would see that trend indicator, okay, saying that the KPIs, went up, say, for example, and that lets me know that, hey, in the last 5-minute interval, number of KPIs went up, and then I can go ahead and investigate. Okay, so what you will see if I'm looking at the core routers here, and let's say something in, the east or the west changes KPI values, you'll actually see over there an arrow will highlight. So also that I'm looking for all, just because I'm looking at the core routers, I can then quickly change just by clicking here, you'll see, to the west group or, the other group. And, generally, again, a visual indicator letting me know that something changed within that group. The KPI value went up or down. Okay, so there's these are the preferences, the trend indicator, and we'll see that in a bit once we cause some faults. The watch view. Okay, so the watch view, very, very useful, and I'll tell you why that's useful. So you can see that if I want to actually monitor specific NEs, which is kind of what I'm doing right now, I can only really closely monitor NEs that are contained. When I say closely monitor, like looking at the individual KPIs for, each network element. I look at the summary view, I can look at the total KPIs for the West group, but you notice I can't really monitor any of the network elements. I can't see any of the network elements in that group unless I go to that group. So, what is that? Like, I can't see all the routers in core, west, and east is basically what I'm trying to say in one view here right now. At least in this view. I could go and create a view that has them all in one group if I wish. But let's say this is the way I have my network laid out. But for whatever reason, let's say I have a few VIP services or something going on my network, and I need to closely monitor maybe a router or routers in the core group, in the West group, the East group, basically any group within your view. And I want to monitor all of them in one view to closely monitor the KPIs. That's where your watch view is. Okay, so the watch view basically allows you to drag out any, VIP routers or any certain routers from any group and closely watch those specific routers with full trend analysis and full dynamic KPI, okay, KPI monitoring. So the KPIs will light up right away. So if I click on this now, I mean, it says open watch drawer. There's nothing here. Okay, but I do see some, KPIs, cards, ports affected, and so forth. But again, there's nothing there. So what I can do is that I can actually, okay, if I want, I can say add to watch view. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of routers to watch view. Oh, there it goes. Just took a second. Okay, I'm going to head over to SR2. One other thing I will show you is if you're in the any list, I can actually drag them. So I can take SR1, I'll drag it over here into the watch view. And I'll come down here into the other group and I'll drag this guy over here. So now you see what I have. So now in the watch view, I have full KPI monitoring across all four of those routers, which are actually in multiple groups. And I can leave that there. The summary view is still there if I want, right? And I can still go back and I can monitor any of these if I want. I can still monitor my core. So now I kind of got three different views here with full, right? With full KPI representation. Back to my matrix view. So here's my matrix view. And again, if any of these KPIs light up, this is going to light up right away. So now, I'm closely monitoring any of these. And if any of these KPIs change, it's going to light up and alert me right away to say, hey, something's changed here. Something additional has went down. I have an extra KPI that's lit up. Please go basically, go and investigate. And then all I would simply do then, let's say if SR3, lit up, for example, then you can see here is I can quickly click and I can go current alarms, or I can go event timeline, or I can go to any of the other features. Okay. I find this watch view is also very useful in service supervision, which we'll see. Okay. So moving along. This is just looking at the different views, which I've already shown. So I'm just going to bump through those. The troubleshooting map is actually a type of topology view. The difference being is it looks at the router from its hop count. Okay, so if you're looking at the topology view, of course, it looks at the entire topology. Sometimes I may only want to look so far from that router. I may want to troubleshoot from 1 hop or 2 hops or 3 hops in my troubleshoot. It's kind of obviously a way of, segregating or breaking my troubleshooting down. So you can see by default, if I say show the troubleshooting map, you can see the router I selected is in the middle. And it will look and show you any of the links or any of the routers that are 1 hop away by default. So I can take a look here and I can see everything's fine, or I can start my troubleshooting there, right? I can increase to 2 hops, right? And I can continue to go there. And of course, my topology view will grow. And yes, the statuses of that stuff will change, right? When links and everything go down as well. And I show the multi-layer map. So this is a great example here, right? It shows, which I mentioned, you can see the physical layer is fine. However, obviously the IGP is affected in some way, shape, or form, right? Equipment inventory. So I did show how it can quickly show the affected objects, but if one wanted to look at the entire inventory itself, you could say show the equipment inventory. Okay, and it basically ends up being a drop-down very similar to the Java UI. However, right, keep in mind, none of those, nice little pop-up windows. If you're just looking at data, over on the right, it does have, all the data that you can look at there. And it does have some options here. Okay, one of the main option, of course, is the show object. So if I did, if I didn't want to look, but I did actually now want to configure something or look a bit further, I can say show object, and up will pop the properties form for that card slot in this example. Okay, let's get to the event timeline. So as I quickly said, this is basically a visual representation. Well, so first it's a monitoring tool. Really what it is, you can see it's an analyzing tool for determining, well, either determining a root cause or, just really kind of taking a look and seeing what's happened in a time frame, or, you're curious if something happened or whatever. But basically any type of events, basically what's selected here. And you can see when I opened up the settings, there was quite a bigger list actually than what you see here. So this probably might be from a different release. But so any events on, ports or network elements or VNFs or links or cards or whatever, any type of events, and I would say like basically an attribute changed, a database, something, an attribute in the database changed, a state change, whether the overall state of it went from, up, down, and so forth, any alarms that got raised on any of those objects, as well as any configuration changes. And that's a nice one, right? So if someone went in and actually manually changed something on a port or turned it up or turned it down or anything, we can now see this stuff nicely logged in a nice timeline of events for us. Not only that, we can actually see for the most part, quite easily, if that change, caused any outages. So if that change caused a bunch of alarms, because you'll see a bunch of alarms clustered around that change. On top of it, you can also see additions if something was created. You can also see if something was deleted. Okay, which is great as well. If somebody deleted something and that deletion caused something. So I'll show you how that works as well. And this is like I said, this is just an excellent feature. So when I open up the event timeline, or if you open up the event timeline, this is basically what you're going to see. This slide kind of gives you just an idea on what everything looks like and what you're looking at. So over on the left-hand side, you see this update, config, and alarm. And those are sort of the three main categories you will get. So an update event is obviously any type of attribute or anything, any record in the database for that object that gets changed or, obviously updated, as well as something that gets, created or deleted or anything like that. You will see here. Configuration change, self-explanatory. Anybody that goes and makes a configuration change. And yes, this will log CLI configuration changes as well. We'll talk about that in a second. So any configuration changes from NFM-P or NSP or CLI, it will log. And then, of course, you see any alarms. Now, one of the major benefits, of course, is clustering. So you can see here, it says a cluster, but in reality, I would look at all of these here, okay, depending on what your zoom level is and what you're looking at in your timeline. But most likely, all of these events right here are really probably one outage. That's most likely one problem. And what I can quickly see here is that it's probably something that happened due to multiple config changes, or at least one config change that maybe automatically cause another config change within NSP, maybe another config change, but there was probably at least one configuration change that happened here that we can see caused a bunch of database updates, which in turn caused, a critical alarm, another alarm, and actually a couple clears, maybe somewhere else, but obviously something happened here for sure. And the nice thing is that even further, not only can we see that this happened, but we can now dig further into it. So if somebody were to go in and actually click on any of these configuration change, and this is awesome here, we can see a couple things. First, we can see the actual alarm, or what actually it was, or what attribute that actually got changed. Okay, so let's say, for example, if somebody administratively down a port, we'll see that the configuration change was the administrative attribute being changed, from up to down or locked or unlocked. 2, we get to see what the previous value was, which is awesome for troubleshooting and awesome for fixing, because sometimes you might know what the problem is, or even if you got to the point where you know what you now know, hey, something happened or this got changed. But I've seen lots of times where it's like, okay, well, what was the previous value? What do we need to change this back to fix the problem? And sometimes this might actually involve going back and looking at network maps or network mops or procedures or, old CLI configs or whatever it is. But this will actually log the old attribute. So what the attribute was before the config change. So most likely it probably already tells you what the value was when everything was working. And then, of course, it tells you what the new value is now when everything's not working. And then finally, the last thing it will tell you, now keep in mind, it will only tell you this if the change was made through through the NSP or NFM-P. It will tell you the user. Okay, so if, as you're well aware, the NSP has user logging, so it will tell you, obviously, the time, what user it was. Now, if it is a CLI change, unfortunately, like I said, it will not tell you what the user is, but of course, there's ways to do that, right? You can go in on the router itself, I won't get into it, on the router itself and look at certain security logs there. But from a timeline, it will still tell you what it is. So this is just a phenomenal tool. Because, really back to that fault management, I could have said, well, there's a problem on, SR8, and I could have went right to maybe network supervision, clicked on the timeline, and I guarantee you it would have showed that there was a config change, and it would have showed that the admin user did, shut down the port basically, and then I could go and just, turn it back up again. So just an awesome, awesome tool, and we're going to see this, how it works. You can launch the event timeline. You don't always have to go back to the actual NE itself. You can launch it from an alarm, for example. There's multiple places where you can launch it. And it probably just goes to really show how useful it is. And you might, always want to launch it or from certain spots. So this just gives an example of what you will see, right? So this is, you can see exactly what I just mentioned, right? So this is a user who actually admin down a port. And clicking on that actual config change event over here, you can see it was user admin, the property name, the previous actually, sorry, this was somebody turning up the port, looks like, got cleared. So it was previously out of service and now it's in service, right? So this would be somebody who was actually fixing it. And we can see the clear alarm actually there with it. Looks like something happened a little bit later. If you were to zoom out from this, you would see that they're not so close, and we'll actually, we'll see how that works in the use case in labs. There's also what's called a pattern finder. So anyone that troubleshoots will know that sometimes it's good to go back and see if, has this issue happened before? Because we might want to go back and maybe take a look at the events that happened beforehand. So you can actually highlight a pattern of events in the event timeline, and you can run, that's what the pattern tool is. And it will actually go back in time in the event timeline, and it will look for similar patterns. So you can actually then go back and look at, details of the alarm. And as you might have guessed, if that pattern includes a fix, you might actually see the fix that was performed at an earlier point in time to fix that problem, right? Giving you indication on how to fix the current problem. Okay, so this is another great, great tool to use. Okay, quick, before I show a use case, I'm just going to get to the tool here. I'm going to make sure I've shown, at least gave an overview of what most things are. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get back to our topology groups here. And I'm just going to stop sharing for just a minute. Just going to create a fault here. I'll show you how useful this can be. Okay, fault should be coming in any minute. All right, back to sharing quickly. Okay, so before I get in and show you the application, I'm going to show you the Java UI. So here's the Java UI and a problem we have right now, right? Of course, we can get some data from the Java UI. We can see the physical link is down. We have just a whole boatload of problems here. The old dynamic alarm list is doing its thing. You see alarms being raised, alarms being cleared, right? Probably somebody might be able to look at this and say, well, link down, tunnel down, there's a lag down. That might be most likely the problem of it. So, you can get pretty far. You go and you take a look at the lag down, right? So you take a look at the lag down, you take a look at the details. What's the details going to tell us? Well, the details tell us that could be a cable, could be a physical port. Well, I'll tell you, if you go and look at the physical ports, you can spend as much time as you want on this. The physical ports are actually fine. So one would probably go and take a look at the physical ports, and unfortunately, they would find that the ports are okay. I can tell you the cable's okay. Basically, everything it's saying here to do, in this exact case anyways, is not really the issue. So let's go and take a look at the network supervision. Okay, and sure enough, you can see in a couple areas, one right in the core, you see that trending right away that we saw. And actually, well, what do you know? I didn't intentionally do this, by the way, but SR3, I actually did add to the watch view. And you can see over in the watch view, my arrow is up. So again, this is telling me, right, KPIs just went up on SR3. Notice it also says KPIs also went up on SR5. Now, obviously, SR5 I didn't have in my watch view over here, but I can see. However, it looks like more KPIs went up on SR3, and that's because it's orange instead of yellow. And it's over top left. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at a couple different things we can do. So let's take a look at the topology view. All right, topology view. Notice the core group now has a little bit of it lit up there. See that little ring there is kind of red? You can go and take a look at the topology view, and what do you know, right? So very similar to our Java NFM-P Java UI here. This is very interesting though, right? Take a look at the mouse over. It says endpoint A, SR3, lag 2, okay, disabled, unlocked. Endpoint B on SR5 is enabled and unlocked. So really, the lag on SR5 is probably okay. However, the lag on SR3 is definitely having some sort of issue, looks like. Okay, so we can see here it's disabled. Definitely know we have a problem there. Let's take a look at the multi-layer view for a sec. Okay, interesting. Well, we would expect, I guess, if the lag is down, we have an IGP issue. Sure enough, we do. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the current alarms. Well, by impact count, look at the highest impacting alarm. It's our lag. Look at my impact diagram. Sure enough, this is telling me looks like the lag is the root cause, which is causing equipment to be down, links to be down, physical links to be down. This pretty much looks like I found it. However, what is the exact problem? What is causing the lag to be down? And this is really where the event timeline, without the event timeline, you're kind of at this point, you're kind of stuck with, looking at your alarm details and things of that nature to really try and come up with, what the problem is, right? So this is where, the event timeline really comes into play. So like I said, we've already looked at a lot of these details. So here's the event timeline. Okay, so what do we have here? So I can zoom in, I can zoom out. Okay, my event timeline. And if I do that, I can see right around, you can see I have a bunch of events here that are really, really close to each other, right? So 30, so we see 511, 511, 15, and then by the seconds, this is very, very close to each other here. So all this is definitely related. But notice one of the basically the very first thing that happens is what? It's a config change. This is very interesting, right? And what does this tell me? Right? And again, I wouldn't really know this unless I did this. Generally, what happens is somebody gets to the lag, which is one of these. Here it is, the lag. And then they either, they go CLI or they start, they come here info and they say view alarmed object. And they start searching around all over the place here to see what the problem is. Okay. By doing this, I can see right away, okay, I have a config change. What's the config change? The admin user changed some property known as a port threshold. The previous was 0, the current is 3. And as soon as that happened, it forced another config change, which is actually the operational state. So it was an automatic config change, okay, followed by what? A bunch of alarms, right? So we have a bunch of criticals. If I start zooming out, a bunch of criticals, a bunch of warnings, a bunch of database changes. I mean, we got a whole bunch of stuff going on here, right? But this is the big thing right here, okay? Port threshold. All right. There's my lag down. All right. Now we know what the attribute is. Let's go look at it. Okay, bingo, right away. Automatically pops up the properties form in the NFM-P for me. Okay, now remember what it was, port threshold, right? Now, I know a lot of people, the NFM-P has a lot of tabs, and it happens, right? People come in here and they start going around, they're like, what is port threshold? Where is it? Where does it live? And they start looking all over the place here for it. So, and this is not something new, by the way, but I always like to show it. A lot of people don't even know it exists. There's actually a find tool to help you find anything really on any of these tabs. So technically what I could do is, I know it said port threshold. So I could say, okay, well, I wonder where this port threshold is. If I hit this and I just say, I could actually search for port. I could search for a threshold. Caps lock doesn't really matter though. Threshold. Wow, look at that, right? Port threshold. Ah, interesting. So there's something called port threshold. The event timeline told me that this got changed from 0 to 3, and then everything happened. I'm going to say show on form, and there you go. Well, under link aggregation group, port threshold. There's the 3. Okay, so now, well, it told me what it was before the problem. It was 0. Well, look at that. These alarms are disappearing. Right? See the alarms clearing here. Okay, the trending arrow is gone. But look at that. New trending arrow. What does the down trending arrow tell me? Right? KPIs are getting cleared. They're decreasing. So if it went away and I came back and somebody fixed this while I was away, I'm automatically alerted to the fact that something got fixed here. Right? KPIs are going down. Good. Okay, well, what I could also do if I wanted to, I want to see maybe what got fixed. Okay. I can go to something's thinking. Something by accident. Matrix view. Okay. And from here, right, I could view that nice event timeline again. Look at it this time. Looks quite different, right? Look at all the clears. Clear, 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 clear. Okay. And I can start looking at all this stuff. Well, there's the config change. It forced all these other little config changes. That's because the status of a lot of other things actually happened. But notice how one of these config changes now is the port threshold. Okay. There is there, port threshold, 3 to 0. Okay. So, let's see. 322, we got to run this quick. Service supervision is quite a lot faster because the app is actually very, very similar to this app. So let's get this going here. Okay, so just give me 1 second and I'm going to insert actually before I do the faults. Yeah, let's see these group of routers and the master group. Okay, perfect. Okay, so what I'll get you to do is anybody that has doing hands-on, if you can view the East group of routers in the matrix view. So what we're looking at here, guys, is first of all, for your view, I want to make sure you're on the view topology groups. So look at the topology groups view. Okay, and then go in and take a look at the East group of routers. So once you're looking at number 7, routers 7 and 8 here, while I insert the fault. Okay, so you should have seen something change, and I'll give you just a few minutes to run through that. We got to move along here. I want to make sure at least get the use case and the lab and service supervision. The good thing is most of the features are fairly similar. We're just looking at the service side of things. So I'll give you a couple minutes to finish this, and then I'll run through it. I give about another minute. Okay. Take a look at this issue. So first thing is it says, have you noticed the KPI change on R7 and R8? What visual cues alerted you about this? So what are we looking for here? Well, a couple things. We're looking for color, of course, trend, which I guess that took too long. Trend went away, but we did have an up arrow there on 7 and 8. Maybe I should have left my trend indicator for a longer period of time. But really, like I said, trend indicator, and then we go from there. So we get the visual cue alerting us of the issue. Okay. And it says double click the eScooper routers. View the topology view. And double click the East group of routers. So topology view, if you remember, we need to go to the changer here, the format changer. Go topology view. Okay, and notice we got that nice, we got that red ring there on East. So it says double click on the East view. All right, back to our lab. Okay, select a red link. What clue does a mouse over in this link tell you? So let's select the red link. Okay, and a typical mouse over again, right? Similar to the last one, actually, just getting you to step through the clicks and the next steps. So it looks like this is a lag between 7 and 8. So different spot, looks like. It's disabled on endpoint A, which is SR7, enabled on B. So, looks like most likely a problem with the lag on SR7. Okay. Again, if you want more information, if anybody did, they can click on the lag there and get more information here as well, if need be. Back to the alarm. Okay, view SR7 alarms and sort by impact count. Do any of the alarms have an impact count? If so, look at the impact diagram. Okay, and is this outage affecting the IGP infrastructure? Interesting question, which generally we should be able to see from an impact diagram if it's related. And what is the root cause? So let's take a look at this. So from here, I can actually look at the alarms. I don't know if you remember, but those nice quick buttons up here, I don't actually have to go all the way back to the router itself. A lot of areas do have these quick buttons up here. Okay. And looking at the alarms, well, sure enough, if I sort by impact count, we do have a high one there. So we're going to look at the impact alarms. And interesting, right? So the last one said, it was links down and all that stuff, but didn't really seem to be affecting the IGP in any way. But this one does. So it looks like we actually do. We are affecting the IGP, the OSPF, at least the interface looks to be down from this standpoint. Neighbor down, OSPF interface down. So to answer that question, does look like we have something here. Okay, and was this issue caused by config change? If so, what exactly was changed and by which NSP user? So like I did before, what I always like to do, we now know it's by SR7, right? Looks like we have something administratively down on SR7. Okay, that one's pretty easy. It tells us there in the alarm, but we can still look at the event timeline. Okay, and then looking at some of the actual config changes here, can see, there it is. So we kind of group all these together. We can see basically everything started here. Everything was fine, right? Up until this point. And here's a config change right at the beginning. We have the admin user changing the admin state of the lag. Okay, so again, just kind of stepping through what, the use case and what the actual changes are. So again, really all starts with that visual cue of the KPIs and the trend analysis, and then going from there. Generally, it goes the trend analysis. You can look at topology, or sometimes people will go right to the alarms, look at the alarms, check the impact counts if need be. And I've seen sometimes people will just go right from the KPIs right to the event timeline. Okay, so you can see how useful the event timeline definitely is in this case. So you can click that there. And generally the fix, right, would be to click. It's actually not, there it is, sorry. There's a window that just popped up in the background. And I'll just turn that up just to get the network back and up and running. And then we'll move on to service supervision. So I have about 30 minutes. That should give me 25-ish minutes. That should give me enough time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the use case into play right away, because that's what I like to do here and explain things as I go with the use case. Simple being, like I said, a lot of the features are very similar to network supervision. It's just more for services. So we'll see how that works. So just going to stop sharing for a quick second. Okay, so anybody doing hands-on, you can switch right over to the service supervision. So again, we can do a quicker change by using this method instead of going back to the dashboard. And let's take a look at some quick slides. Just I mainly want to point out the differences of service supervision over network supervision. Okay,
Shane, you're not sharing.
Well, I'm not sharing.
Right.
Thanks for letting me know.
No problem.
All right, excellent. Okay, so like I said, mainly want to point out the differences and some features here in service supervision. So obviously the biggest differences here is we're going to focus on services and service objects. So if I want to look at my network from that standpoint as a starting point, I want to focus in on some services, and in particular, maybe some VIP services. If you remember the watch view, I can incorporate and pull out some certain VIP services. Again, a lot of the same type of thing here where we're going to use KPIs. Now, obviously, the KPIs are going to be a little bit different, right? We're talking about service objects. So, we're not going to see a port, and a card down. We're going to see more things like, our access interfaces down, our SDPs down, our service sites down, and of that nature. Okay. We have trending representation, which is, the same type of deal, same as pops up for network elements. It's going to pop up for our services. One big difference in service supervision is OEM testing. So there's actually in the Java UI, you can do OEM testing. There's now incorporated OEM testing using the service supervision. So you don't need to go to the Java UI to run some OEM tests. You can run some quick on-demand OEM tests using service supervision. Now, if you want to run test suites and things like that, I believe you still have to go to the NFM-P Java UI, but you can do some on-demand OEM testing. And again, we have an event timeline, which is excellent, and topology maps. So, instead of looking at the physical topology, we can look at the service topology, and we can also look at the different layers of the service as well. So the front end of it is almost identical. It uses views and groups. Okay, so I don't think I need to explain that much further. The default view is it groups your services by customer ID. So the network supervision was by product type. This is by customer ID. But as I mentioned, you can create many different customized groups. So what I've done for this lab is I've created a view where I've actually separated. I have a different group per service type. I think I have VPLS, E-type, and I think I have VPRN. So if you're actually on the service supervision, I already had mine changed to that correct view. But what you can do is you can say view, and you can just simply change your view here. So you see there's customer and there's service type. Okay, so just change it to service type view, and that's what you'll see here. If you go customer, you'll see like blue, 3, red. These are the customer IDs, or the customer names, sorry. So, but anyways, I created a whole new one and just say service type. Okay, so I did insert something, and that's why you're seeing the trending going on there right now. Okay, the trending arrows, and I actually already have a watch view created here. Well, what you can see though is it doesn't look like anything in my use case affected any of the services in my watch view, right? Because if it did, just like the watch view of the network supervision, these KPIs would have lit up. Okay, so this is the place where you would put sort of your, if you have any VIP services, that's, you have one service in a group and another service in another group, you can pull out those services and closely monitor in real time the KPIs of those services. And then the second anything happens at one of those services, these KPIs are going to light up, and then you immediately start troubleshooting it. Okay, so again, those visual representations are very, very key. Same thing as network supervision. All the KPIs are up front. Okay, not only for groups, but also for the network, also for the services in the group. So I'll show you the services in the group. So here's VPLS. So I can click in a group, and a little bit different. You don't get those network element icons, but you do get a list of the services. Now, one thing I need to point out here, by default, you'll notice because, well, troubleshooting, I'm generally going to click in here if I want to investigate some services. So because of that, the default view, it takes me to only shows me services that are affected, which means services where KPIs are activated or lit up. If I mouse over, I can see what's going on here. So I do have a couple services here. One, I have a couple that are the sites look to be down, and then the endpoints look to be down as well. Okay, I have some other endpoints that are here. So the reason why this is so important is because I've seen people come in here and they say, well, I can't find a certain service. And they're like, where's my certain VPLS, or where's my whatever? And that's because most likely the service they're looking for, if they came in here, doesn't have any KPIs lit up. Okay, so, and I'll show you if I go into VPRN, you notice by default, it's not showing any services, right? Because, well, it's all green right now. There's no affected services. So if I want to see the actual services in here and go into them and run OAM tests or anything like that, I just quickly switch to all services. Now I can see them, okay? And this is where I can now select a service, and I can, drag out to my watch view. That one didn't go. Maybe it's already there. I'm not sure. Yeah, so the first one must have already been there in my list. You can see it's added. Okay, so if you're trying to build a watch view there, like I said, make sure, or you can't find a service, make sure it's set to all services, because to see every single service there besides the affected ones. Okay, so just back here again, you can see once I go into a group, I can look at alarms for a group, and this is why I always show fault management application first. And now we're getting into some of the features of the alarm management. So just like the NEs, just like the services, you can always look at the alarms of a group. You can look at specific alarms for a service just through a single click of a button. So this will be looking at alarms for the entire group, right? Whereas if I go back here, right, you can click on a service, and I can say alarms. So I can look at the alarms just for that particular service. So multiple layers of filtering here. This will give me alarms for both these services, for example. Okay, so we can always look at alarms, right, which obviously leads to a lot of the great features of the fault management, like the impact analysis. Okay, just really showing all the different KPIs. I'm not going to go through them. Simple mouse over where I'll actually tell you what all of these are, but a lot of these do give us quite an indication, and they do help us basically prioritizing certain things, or actually giving us a bit of information about, how the service is down or why it's down as well. Okay. Also, what I can do is from the service itself, I can quickly navigate to objects within the service. Okay, so if I actually, from any of these services, for example, you can see, well, this tells me sites are down and endpoints are down. Well, now that I know that sites are down, I might want to go and actually look at those sites, for example, or look at some tunnel binding. There's endpoints. This told me that endpoints are down. Okay, so I can actually go in and I can click on endpoints and I'll look at the endpoints here. You can see the endpoints. Okay, so there's the endpoint that's down. The KPI told me that at least one endpoint was down, right? That's why it went red. So there's the endpoint. So that's how I can quickly navigate into the service. Okay, so I can go into all that stuff there. So all the different, the tunnel bindings or the sites itself. Okay. One of the other things is a service map, which we'll talk about in a second. And just like the other applications, any of the main objects, I can quickly launch or tell the Java UI to find its properties for them. And I really love it for this one because finding a specific service sometimes is not the easiest, especially in big customers. If you go manage services, you bring up that service window, there's thousands and thousands of services there, right? And all those lines look the same. Lots of times the naming schemes are, they might have a naming scheme, but maybe they're off by one value or a number. So it's always nice, everything saves time if you're troubleshooting where you can just one right click and it basically does all that for you. It does, instead it bypasses launching the managed services window and filters and whatever, and will automatically pop up that service properties window for you. So that's extremely useful, right here. So there we go. You can see the view properties. And there you go. So you can see much, much faster than, going managed services and doing a search. And actually not only, potentially maybe clicking and bringing up the wrong service. I mean, who knows, right? So anyways, very, very convenient just to be able to bring up the properties form of that service right away. Okay, back to my slides here. Trending, nothing new there. Just letting you know that trending is also in service supervision. Again, we have the visual cues as well as the watch view. So being able to drag out certain individual VIP services. Okay, viewing SAPs, viewing SB bindings, and absolutely love this one, right? Timeline. So you can actually look at a full timeline, event timeline for the service. Okay, so that's great. And actually lots of times, when I see me personally, I see, a service is down. I'll click on the service and, sometimes I'll just launch the timeline right away just to see if there's, anything to change on the service, event changes, config changes, what have you, because, it is that useful. Now, similar thing I will say to the network supervision is you need to, or the, network supervision, you need to enable it. So you notice timeline settings. Okay, so that window pops up. So there it is there. So you need to enable the event recording. So again, keep that in mind. Want to tell you so people aren't like, I'm not getting events or mine's not working. So just enable it. And then from that point, it should be working. No problem. Okay. All right, just talk about the event timeline. So don't really need to go through these slides. The event timeline is basically the exact same. There's not much different there, okay, besides maybe some of the events you're going to see because they're obviously for services, as you can see. You can select actually configuration. You can select and filter which events you want. If you want to make it smaller, I mean, technically, if you only want to look at events for a site or a SAP or whatever it is, you can filter and look for those. Sometimes this event timeline I will say, definitely could get a little congested. And don't forget, I don't think I've pointed this out yet, but there is a time range filter. So you can, if you know the exact time or specific time range and, an alarm will tell you that, you can put in a smaller filter, right, to make that area of your event timeline smaller so it's not as noisy. Okay, and same thing here, event details, nothing new. You click on any events, it gives you the information on the right-hand side. Here's the on-demand OAM test. So basically, here's the icon you're looking for. These little icons here. And basically, it depends on the service where you can run the actual OAM tests from. So if, for example, so I don't see anything here. If I click on the ePipe, And let's say if I go into the tunnel bindings, you can see right up here, I see this OEM test results. Now I could go in and look at previous results, so results of previous OEM tests. What I can do is, because there are certain OEM tests that can be run with the source of that OEM test being a tunnel, an E-pipe tunnel. And because of that, I now have this option available, run OEM tests. Okay, so you can see similar to the Java UI, okay, but now this is just a quick one-time on-demand running of a test. That's it. Okay, there's no, creating test suites or anything here. But if I want to run a quick, LSP ping to check out, the LSP connectivity to make sure the LSP is fine, a trace, an MTU ping, a tunnel ping, or whatever, I can easily do that. Okay, I can simply do that there if I wish. Probably come back to that actually, or we'll leave that for now. Rather. So actually that will, when that succeeds, that one might fail actually because there's a fault in there now. Oh, it actually did succeed. Okay, that's good. So what you can do is once it actually succeeds, then you can hit the information button there. And this is where I can now go in and start looking at the status of my test. So all the data, the test parameters, in my forwarding classes, any times, I can look at the probe, the test results, the individual probes, right? Which will actually give you things like, your round trip time, for example. Okay, so this is where I get the actual data from the, again, one-time on-demand test itself. Hops, well, we won't get a hops for an actual ping, but if you're doing a trace, you can go in and see all the hops from your trace. Okay, but I did want to show you that just a very quick one-time, on-demand OEM test. That's there, looking at the results. Service topology. So obviously that's a very good tool to use. You can see, again, just by one click, I can look at a service map. Okay, so I mean, this is great. This gives us a real good indication. At least it tells me. It looks like I have some tunnels that are, or a tunnel, at least a tunnel that is definitely down. I open up my information over here, window. Sure enough, okay, looks like number of tunnel bindings, 3, number of tunnel bindings down is 1. So I definitely have something that's down here. However, notice the site SR8 is also affected here. Okay, so that's quite interesting. You can see, so I mean, really, to be honest, just from this topology right now, my guess is actually that the main problem is probably somewhere in the SR8 site side of things is generally where I'd probably be looking, at least first off, right? But don't forget, what I can also do is I can look at alarms, right? And just like anything else, there's my impact. Notice I do have an alarm, but one impact here, and it's on SR8. Okay. I can go show impacts or event timeline. Well, let's take a look at show impacts first, see what it says. Voila. Okay. So looks like we have a physical piece of equipment that's causing a service problem. There's a service site down, access interface down, right down to the physical piece of equipment. And I will also see that in my event timeline. Okay, if I go right back, there's the config change. Okay, notice not much before, very nicely grouped together. And all of a sudden I get this config change, right? Also update changes as well. Keep in mind, an update change could do it, right? I've implemented, I don't have anything automatically happening in my network. So I've had to actually do config changes to cause my problems. So I can see this seemed to be, a config change. So there we go. We see who it is and what the actual change is. And now that I know what it is, I can go and reverse it, right? So I go back, my E-pipe. View properties, that opens up my properties form. And then I can, go back and actually turn it up. So basically in this area, what I'd want to do is I'd want to do it on the actual equipment, which is the root. there. Show affected object, and you can see now we're kind of back. It's almost like cross-launching the fault management application. And this is telling me this should fix my service. Let's watch for lots of different things. Lots of visual cues just happen there, right? All right, so we see actually it looks like a few things actually got, a couple things got fixed there. So VPLS, E-pipe, right? But you can see now like a big change, right? Obviously in the KPIs, and everything looks much nicer again, which of course the trending indicator is telling us what happened. Okay, let me quickly see slides. Look at my time here. 53, okay, I think we have just enough time to do the lab. Excellent. Okay, just give me 1 second. And it should only take a few minutes to do this lab.
I just want to say in the just due to the time, if anybody has to leave, I did leave an evaluation there, so it'll take you literally 30 or 40 seconds to fill out. So if you get a chance, I'd appreciate you providing some feedback. That's it. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah. For this one here, it is actually asking you to create a watch view. I know I don't have the slide up right now, but it's, to be honest, you can try and create a watch view. I did it just so you can get used to creating a watch view. Now, just as long as a VPLS, that's actually called default underscore VPLS, is included in that watch view, because that's what we're going to be using, okay? If you don't have time to create the watch view, you don't want to create the watch view, well, then the other suggestion is to just double click and go in and look at the services or in the VPLS view, or you stay at the top level of the groups and just watch the groups. And the KPIs should actually light up in the VPLS group, indicating that there's something wrong with one of those services. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make that change. Okay, you should see something any minute there. Go back, share my screen. I'll give a couple minutes to, that one created a whole lot of alarms. Okay, so you waited for instructions. So basically, like I said, if you didn't create the watch view, that's fine. Take a look at the top level group view instead. So if you're in the watch view, you should see the default VPLS one light up with KPIs. Okay, and then that's going to be your starting point. If you're in the top level group view, you should see the VPLS group KPIs light up, and that's going to be your starting point. Okay, so take a run through this. Yeah, I'll just give one more minute and then I'll run through it. Okay, just a quick run through. So let's take a look at service supervision. All right. So actually over in the watch view, I already have mine created. We're going to notice the default VPLS did indeed light up. Okay, so let's see what it says next. Does any new KPIs become active? If so, select the service associated with them. View the alarms for the service. Do you see any indication of a specific alarm that is causing a major outage? And view the impact diagram. So pretty much standard what we've been doing for most of the use cases. Okay, so there's the service. We're going to take a look at the alarms. And wow, you know, there's definitely one there. Looks like 19 impacts. Okay, so view the impact diagram, export this data. So the exporting was from, I think, fault management. See if you remember it. So we click here. Okay, we can first view the impact diagram. It's going to be a big impact diagram. Quite large. Okay, but the nice thing is, though, we can see that all of these service issues and access interface down really all laid back to one thing, this frame size problem. Okay, looking at the description here, the alarm is raised when a provisioned MTU size value is greater than the supported MTU size value. If you remember how to export this, if I want to export it to actually send on to somebody, I can say export data to CSV. Back to the lab. What is the root alarm? Well, we just saw that. It says it's a frame size problem. And it says that the MTU size is different than what is supported. Okay, so interesting. So that's good. We know what it is. Well, because it sounds like it was maybe some type of configuration change, it might be good to actually check the event timeline. So it says check the event timeline to check for an MTU change event. What is the root cause? Who made the config change? And what is the correct value? Okay, so here, timeline. Oh, zoomed in too close. There it is. Oh, sorry. Zoom out. My zooming is getting a little quick on my... Okay, so we can see here, the admin user, all the critical alarms, the previous value was 1,400. The current value, 5,000. All right, so I'm going to go back. Impact diagram. Remember, I want to look at the object of the root alarm. So there's the root alarm, frame size problem. Remember, if I click on that, I'm going to get the show affected object. Okay. And if I open this guy up, a frame size problem, notice these states down. It says STP bindings down, monitored access interfaces down, sites down. Okay, and I can see here, if I know what a service frame size problem is, it says it was an MTU size problem with the service or at the service level. We didn't see any type of, port alarms or anything there. So looking at the MTU at the service level, sure enough, I can see 1400, 5,000 right there. Okay, so that's where the value got changed from 1400 to 5,000. 1400, apply that. It brings back to normal. Okay, we get a trend indicator finally saying that. Okay, looks good. That's pretty much it.